The CEO stood frozen in the doorway at 2:47 a.m., staring at her company's biggest secret glowing on an unauthorized screen. The man sitting there wasn't supposed to exist in this room. He wore a janitor's uniform with a name tag that read Mason, and hands that moved across the keyboard like a concert pianist who'd forgotten he ever learned to play. "Step away from that computer," Scarlett Vaughn said, her voice cutting through the server room's mechanical hum. "Right now." Mason Carter didn't move. His fingers kept typing, because 40 minutes ago, he'd done something nobody else in this building could do. He'd fixed the unfixable. Before we dive into how a single father working the graveyard shift just saved a billion-dollar company from collapse, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's get into it. Mason Carter had exactly 4 rules for surviving the night shift at Apex Dynamics. Rule 1. Keep your head down. Rule 2. Finish your floors before 4 a.m. Rule 3. Never touch anything that isn't trash. Rule 4. Pretend you don't exist because to everyone else in this building, you don't. At 1:43 a.m. on a Tuesday that felt like every other Tuesday, Mason pushed his cleaning cart past the executive suites on the 42nd floor. The wheels squeaked. They always squeaked. He'd asked maintenance to fix them twice, but maintenance didn't fix things for people who emptied trash cans. His daughter Lily was asleep 3 miles away in their studio apartment, watched by Mrs. Chen from 4B who charged $30 a night and fell asleep by 10:30. Mason knew because he'd installed a cheap camera above their front door. Every night around 2, he'd pull out his phone and check the grainy feed. Lily would be curled under her dinosaur blanket. Mrs. Chen would be snoring in the armchair. It was the only 15 seconds of his shift that didn't feel like drowning. Tonight, the executive floor was silent, except for the building's ventilation system and the distant hum of servers. Rain hammered against floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a city Mason used to think he'd conquer. That was 7 years ago, before everything fell apart, before Victor Hale stole his life's work and left him with nothing but legal bills and a daughter who asked why Daddy didn't go to a real job anymore. Mason emptied the trash in conference room B. Someone had left half a sandwich, roast beef on sourdough. His stomach twisted. He'd eaten ramen for dinner. Again. Lily had gotten the last of the chicken nuggets. He moved methodically. Vacuumed the carpet, wiped down the table, check his phone. Lily hadn't moved. Mrs. Chen's mouth was open. In conference room A, someone had scrawled equations on the whiteboard and forgotten to erase them. Mason recognized the syntax immediately. Machine learning algorithms. Gradient descent optimization. Whoever wrote this was trying to solve a convergence problem in a neural network and failing spectacularly. The math was wrong in the 3rd line. His hand reached for an eraser. He stopped himself. Rule 3. Never touch anything that isn't trash. He erased the board and moved on. The CTO's office was locked, as always. Victor Hale didn't work night shifts. Victor Hale worked country club hours, gave TED Talks, and accepted awards for innovations he'd stolen from the man currently emptying his trash can. Mason had watched one of those talks once. Victor stood on a stage in a $5,000 suit, explaining the breakthrough he'd achieved in adaptive AI systems. The same breakthrough Mason had coded in a coffee shop 7 years ago, shown to his business partner in good faith, and watched disappear into patent filings that listed only Victor's name. The lawsuit had lasted 11 months. Mason's lawyer was $300 an hour. Victor's lawyers were a fleet. When the settlement came, it was enough to almost cover Mason's legal fees and ensure he'd never work in software engineering again. Every company Victor whispered to. Every door that closed. 3 months later, Mason's wife Emily left. Took the car, half the furniture, and whatever remained of his will to fight. She didn't take Lily. Said she wasn't equipped for single parenting. That was 6 years ago. Mason dumped Victor's trash and moved on. The CEO's suite was at the end of the hall. Scarlett Vaughn's name was engraved on brushed steel, beside double doors that probably cost more than Mason made in a year. He'd seen her exactly twice. Once in an elevator where she'd looked through him like he was furniture. Once in the lobby where she'd been on her phone, walking fast, trailing assistants like a comet trailing debris. She was 30 years old, the youngest CEO in Apex Dynamics history. The business magazines called her a prodigy. The tech blogs called her ruthless. Mason called her someone who signed his paychecks and didn't know he existed. Her office was dark. He knocked anyway. Protocol. No answer. He unlocked the door with his master key and stepped inside. The space was ridiculous. Marble floors, a desk the size of his apartment, windows that overlooked the city like a throne room. There was a photo on the credenza, Scarlett with an older man, both holding champagne glasses. Her father, maybe. The late Richard Vaughn, who'd built Apex Dynamics from nothing and died of a heart attack 2 years ago, leaving his only daughter a company worth $3 billion and a board of directors who smiled at her face and sharpened knives behind her back. Mason emptied the small trash can beside her desk. Someone had thrown away a protein bar wrapper and a handwritten note that said, "Budget meeting 9 a.m. Do not reschedule again." He vacuumed the carpet and was halfway to the door when he noticed the light. A thin blue glow was coming from the conference room attached to Scarlett's office. The door was cracked open maybe 2 inches. Mason hesitated. Rule 3. But the light was wrong. It pulsed, flickered, like something was malfunctioning. He pushed the door open. The conference room had been converted into something else entirely. Server racks lined 2 walls. Monitors covered a third. Cables snaked across the floor like mechanical intestines. And on the largest screen, lines of code scrolled past in angry red text, while error messages multiplied faster than anyone could read them. Project Helix. Critical failure. Core system collapse in progress. Mason's breath caught. He knew what Project Helix was. Everyone in the building knew. It was Apex Dynamics' next-generation AI platform. The company had spent 3 years and $200 million developing it. Launch was scheduled for 6 weeks from now. The board had bet everything on this product succeeding, and it was dying right in front of him. The timestamp in the corner showed the system had been failing for 11 minutes. Whoever was supposed to be monitoring this wasn't here. Maybe they'd gone to get coffee. Maybe they'd given up. Mason should leave, close the door, finish his shift, go home. His daughter's face flashed in his mind. Lily asking why they couldn't go to McDonald's like her friend Sophie. Lily wearing shoes that were too small because new ones cost $40 he didn't have. Lily pretending she didn't notice the other kids had tablets and toys and birthday parties at places with ball pits. He looked at the failing system. He looked at his cleaning cart. "This is stupid," he said out loud. Then he sat down at the terminal. The login screen required credentials Mason didn't have. It took him 90 seconds to bypass it. The security protocols were competent but not creative. Whoever built them understood theory but not practice. Mason had written penetration testing software in his previous life. He knew every shortcut. The system accepted his ghost account and the code filled his screen. It was worse than he thought. Project Helix was built on a distributed neural architecture that was collapsing under its own complexity. The core algorithms were sound, brilliant, even, but someone had made catastrophic choices in the implementation layer. Thread management was a disaster. Memory allocation was creating cascading failures. The entire system was eating itself alive. Mason's fingers moved before his brain caught up. He pulled up the kernel logs, found the error propagation patterns, traced them back to a single module that had been modified 8 days ago by someone with the username VHALE. Victor. Of course it was Victor. The modification was trying to optimize processing speed by parallelizing operations that couldn't be parallelized. It was the kind of mistake a first-year computer science student would make. The kind of mistake someone made when they didn't actually understand the code they were working with. Mason felt something cold settle in his chest. Victor had stolen his work 7 years ago, but he'd never understood it. Not really. He'd memorized enough to present it, to defend it in meetings, to build a career on it. But when it came time to actually engineer something new, he floundered. And now the company's entire future was failing because the CTO didn't know what he was doing. Mason created a backup of the existing system. Then he started rewriting. His hands remembered. Muscle memory from years he'd spent living and breathing code. When he used to stay up until 4 in the morning, not because he was working a night shift, but because he'd get lost in the pure logic of solving impossible problems. When programming felt like composing music instead of cleaning up someone else's mess. He rebuilt the thread architecture from scratch, rewrote the memory management protocols, stripped out Victor's modifications, and replaced them with elegant solutions that actually worked. The error messages began to slow. 23 minutes in, the cascade stopped. 31 minutes in, the system stabilized. At 40 minutes and 12 seconds, every screen turned green. Project Helix operating normally. All systems functional. Mason sat back in the chair and released a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The rain outside had stopped. The city lights reflected off wet windows. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen had texted. Lily coughed twice but went back to sleep, still charging $30. He needed to leave, clear his access logs, pretend this never happened. He was closing the terminal when he heard the door open behind him. "Who the hell are you?" The voice was cold, controlled, female. Mason turned slowly. Scarlett Vaughn stood in the doorway wearing a black coat over what might have been pajamas or might have been expensive loungewear. Her dark hair was pulled back. No makeup. She looked younger than her photos and more tired than anyone should look at 2:47 in the morning. She also looked furious. "I asked you a question," Scarlett said. Her eyes moved from his face to his uniform to the glowing screens behind him. "Who are you and why are you inside my private server room?" Mason stood up slowly, kept his hands visible. "My name is Mason Carter. I'm on the cleaning crew." "The cleaning crew?" Her voice could have cut glass. "The cleaning crew that has access to Project Helix?" "No, I bypassed the security." Scarlett's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. "You bypassed enterprise-grade encryption to access classified systems." The encryption was adequate, not enterprise-grade, and yes. "Why?" Mason gestured at the screens. "Because it was failing. 11 minutes into a critical cascade when I found it. Nobody was here. I fixed it." "You fixed Project Helix," Scarlett pulled out her phone, "in 40 minutes. 40 minutes and 12 seconds. My team has been trying to stabilize that system for 9 weeks. Your team didn't know what they were looking at." Scarlett's finger hovered over her phone. "I'm calling security." "That's your choice," Mason said. He was surprised by how calm his voice sounded. Maybe because he'd already lost everything once. There wasn't much left to take. "But first, you should know the problem wasn't random. Someone on your staff deliberately modified core algorithms in a way guaranteed to cause failure, either through incompetence or sabotage." Scarlett lowered the phone slightly. "Explain." Mason pulled up the modification logs. 8 days ago, someone with admin credentials rewrote the neural threading architecture. They parallelized sequential operations, which created race conditions in the processing queue. The system was designed to fail under load. It would have collapsed completely within 72 hours. "Who made the modifications?" Mason showed her the username, VHALE. He watched Scarlett's face as she processed it. She was good at hiding reactions, but not perfect. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Victor Hale is our chief technology officer," she said. "I know who he is. He's also one of the most respected engineers in the industry. He's also the person who stole my work 7 years ago and destroyed my career." The words came out before Mason could stop them. He hadn't planned to say it, hadn't planned any of this. Scarlett was very still. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a documented fact. I can prove it. But that's not why I'm telling you." Mason pointed at the screen. "I'm telling you because Victor Hale doesn't understand the systems he's responsible for. He never did. And if he's the one managing Project Helix, it's going to fail. Not because of bad luck, because he's fundamentally incapable of doing the job." "And you can do the job." Scarlett's voice was flat. "A janitor's. A janitor who just saved your company's flagship product in under an hour." They stared at each other. Outside, the city was starting to wake up. Delivery trucks on distant streets, early morning joggers, people heading to jobs where they were seen. Scarlett's phone rang. She glanced at it. "My head of engineering, probably wondering why Project Helix just fixed itself." She declined the call. "I should have you arrested." "Probably. You accessed classified systems, bypassed security. You could have stolen proprietary code worth millions." "I could have. I didn't." "How do I know that?" Spato. Mason met her eyes. "You don't. But you know I fixed a problem your entire engineering team couldn't solve. And you know your CTO either sabotaged the company or doesn't know what he's doing. So you have a choice. You can report me, get me arrested, and go into your board meeting in 5 hours with a system that's stable but a team that has no idea why. Or what?" Or you trust me enough to let me show you exactly how broken things really are? Scarlett was quiet for a long moment. Mason could see her thinking, calculating. She hadn't become CEO at 30 by making reckless decisions, but she also hadn't gotten here by being afraid to take risks. "Why should I trust you?" she asked finally. "Because I have a 6-year-old daughter who needs me to not be in jail. Because I have nothing to gain from sabotaging this company. And because whether you believe it or not, I used to be very good at this job, before someone took it from me." Another silence. Rain started again outside. Soft patter against windows. Scarlett looked at the screens, at the green status indicators, at the stable system that had been dying 40 minutes ago. She looked back at Mason. "The board meeting is at 9 a.m., she said. "They're expecting a status report on Project Helix. If I tell them it collapsed last night and a janitor fixed it, I'll lose what little credibility I have left." "Then don't tell them that." "What do you suggest?" Mason thought about it. About Lily sleeping 3 miles away? About Mrs. Chen charging $30 a night? About 7 years of being invisible? "Give me until the meeting," he said. "Let me document what I found. Let me show you exactly what's wrong and how to fix it permanently. Then you decide what to do with the information. And if I decide you're lying or stealing, then you have me arrested and I've lost 1 night of sleep. But if I'm right, you'll know the truth about what's happening in your own company." Scarlett studied him. Mason had the strange feeling she was seeing him, actually seeing him for the first time, not as furniture, not as invisible, as a person. "What's your full name?" she asked. "Mason Carter." "And you really fixed this? Yourself?" "Yes." "In 40 minutes. 40 minutes and 12 seconds. The corner of Scarlett's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "My office. Now. You're going to show me everything." She turned and walked out. Mason grabbed his cleaning cart and followed the CEO who'd just decided to take the biggest risk of her career. Scarlett's main office was exactly as impersonal as Mason remembered. Expensive furniture, corporate art. Nothing that suggested an actual human worked here. She sat behind her massive desk and gestured for him to take a chair. Mason sat. His janitor uniform felt wrong in this space, like wearing a costume to a funeral. "Start from the beginning," Scarlett said, "and don't leave anything out." So Mason talked. He told her about 7 years ago, about developing a revolutionary AI architecture in a coffee shop while working 3 part-time jobs, about showing it to his business partner Victor Hale, who he'd trusted completely, about Victor filing patents under his own name, about the lawsuit Mason couldn't afford to fight properly, about the settlement that destroyed him financially and the blacklist that destroyed him professionally. He told her about Emily leaving, about Lily, about the studio apartment and Mrs. Chen and ramen for dinner. He told her about tonight, about finding Project Helix failing, about recognizing the architecture as derivative of his own work, about seeing Victor's modifications and knowing instantly they were wrong. Scarlett listened without interrupting. Her face gave nothing away. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "That's quite a story," she said finally. "It's the truth. Truth is subjective in court." "I know. That's why I lost." Scarlett pulled up something on her computer. Victor Hale joined Apex Dynamics 8 years ago. He was hired specifically because of his work on adaptive AI systems. That work is the foundation of Project Helix. That work is my work. "Can you prove it?" Mason pulled out his phone. It was old, cracked screen, but it worked. He pulled up a cloud storage account he'd maintained since before everything collapsed. Every iteration, every prototype, every line of code, time-stamped and backed up, dating back 9 years. He sent her the access link. Scarlett opened it on her computer. Mason watched her scroll through years of his life. Code repositories, design documents, patent applications he'd filed before Victor beat him to it. She opened a file dated 8 years and 4 months ago. It contained the core architecture of what would become Project Helix. She opened one of Victor's patent filings. Side by side, they were nearly identical. "Jesus," Scarlett said quietly. "He changed variable names, restructured some functions, but the fundamental architecture is mine. The innovations he claimed to develop were ones I showed him in confidence." Scarlett closed the files. She looked tired. "Do you know how many lawsuits this company is currently facing?" "No." 17. Patent disputes, labor violations. A discrimination case from a former VP who claims the board pushed her out. Every single one could cost us millions. Some could cost us everything. She rubbed her eyes. And now you're telling me our CTO built his entire career on stolen work. I'm telling you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. The board loves Victor. He's charismatic. He gives great presentations. He makes them feel smart. He's also incompetent at the actual work. Can you prove that too? Mason thought about it. Let me see the Project Helix codebase. All of it. Give me 2 hours and I'll show you every mistake, every flaw, every shortcut that's going to cause problems. I'll document it in a way your engineers can verify. Scarlett checked her watch. It was 3:24 a.m. The board meeting is in 5.5 hours. Then I better get started. If you're wrong, if any of this is fabricated, I will have you prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Understood. If you're right, Scarlett trailed off. I don't know what happens if you're right. You make a decision about what kind of company you want to run. She studied him again. Mason held her gaze. He had nothing left to hide. There's a workstation in the war room, Scarlett said. Down the hall, third door on the left. I'll give you system access. You have until 8:30 to show me what you found. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She stood up. I'm taking a massive risk on someone I met 45 minutes ago. If this backfires, we both lose. Mason stood too. Why are you doing it? Scarlett was quiet for a moment. Because I inherited a company my father built from nothing. Because the board thinks I'm too young and too inexperienced to handle it. Because I'm tired of smiling at men who underestimate me. And because if there's even a chance you're telling the truth, I need to know. She walked to the door and opened it. The war room. 2 hours. Don't make me regret this. Mason walked past her into the hallway. His cleaning cart was still sitting outside the server room. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen. She's fine. Stop checking. He checked anyway. Lily was still asleep. Mason found the war room. It was smaller than Scarlett's office, but more functional. Whiteboards covered 2 walls, a conference table, 6 workstations. He sat down at the nearest computer and logged in with the credentials Scarlett had sent him. Project Helix opened on his screen. 3 million lines of code, 7 years of development, $200 million invested. Mason cracked his knuckles and got to work. At 5:47 a.m., Mason had filled 11 pages with documented failures. He'd found security vulnerabilities that would have been exploited within days of launch, memory leaks that would crash the system under normal load, threading problems that created race conditions, database queries so inefficient they'd bog down response times to unusable levels. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, he found evidence of Victor's incompetence. Functions that did nothing, copy-pasted code with variables that didn't match, comments that contradicted the code beneath them. It was the work of someone who understood presentations, but not programming. Someone who'd spent 7 years coasting on stolen genius and praying nobody looked too close. The door opened behind him. Scarlett walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of Mason. You've been at this for 2.5 hours. I could do this for 10 more and still find problems. Show me what you have. Mason pulled up his documentation. Scarlett sat beside him and read. Her expression shifted from neutral to concerned to angry. This can't all be real, she said. It's all real, and it's all verifiable. Any competent engineer can check my work. Why didn't anyone catch this before? Because Victor is good at hiding incompetence. He delegates the actual coding to junior engineers, then takes credit for their work. He focuses on high-level architecture discussions where you don't need to understand implementation details. And anyone who questions him gets buried in technical jargon until they give up. Scarlett scrolled through the documentation. You're telling me we're about to launch a product that will fail catastrophically? Yes. And our CTO is either sabotaging us or has no idea what he's doing. Both. The sabotage is accidental, the incompetence is real. She set down her coffee cup harder than necessary. The board meeting is in 3 hours. They're expecting me to confirm we're on schedule for launch. You can't launch this, not as it is. If we delay, we lose our market window. Competitors will beat us to market. We'll lose investor confidence. The stock will tank. If you launch broken, You'll destroy the company's reputation permanently. Scarlett stood up and paced. Mason watched her think. She moved like someone used to making decisions alone. Quick steps, sharp turns, her mind working through scenarios. Can you fix it? She asked suddenly. Eventually, it would take months. We don't have months. I know. Can you fix enough of it to make launch viable? Mason considered it. I'd need a team, full access, and I'd need Victor out of the way. Victor reports to me. I can sideline him. The board won't like that. The board doesn't know what I know. She stopped pacing and looked at him. If I bring you in officially, if I make you part of the team, I need to know you can deliver. No more surprises. No hidden agendas. My only agenda is keeping my daughter fed and housed. That's honest, at least. Scarlett checked her watch. I need to make a decision, right now. What are your options? Option 1. I go into that board meeting, tell them everything's fine, launch on schedule, and pray it doesn't explode. Option 2. I tell them the truth, delay launch, lose credibility, and probably lose my job. Option 3. She looked at him. Option 3 is insane. What's option 3? I postpone the board meeting, claim a critical technical issue that needs 24 hours to resolve. I bring you in as an emergency consultant. We fix enough of the system to prove it can be saved. Then I go to the board with evidence of what Victor did and a solution that keeps us on track. That's not insane. That's smart. It's betting the company on a janitor I met 3 hours ago. I'm not a janitor. I'm an engineer who happens to clean offices. Scarlett almost smiled. The distinction seems important to you. It is. She pulled out her phone, started typing. I'm sending an email to the board, technical complications, meeting postponed to tomorrow, emergency system maintenance required. They'll ask questions. Let them. I'm the CEO. I make the calls. She hit send. There. Done. We have 24 hours. Mason felt something shift in his chest. Hope, maybe. Or terror. What do you need from me? Everything you've got. I'm bringing in my top engineers. You're going to walk them through every problem you found. If they verify your work, if this is all real, we move forward. If they find holes in your analysis, security escorts you out, and we never speak of this again. Fair. And Mason? Scarlett's voice was serious. I'm trusting you. Don't make me look like an idiot. I won't. She headed for the door, then stopped. One more question. Why did you help? You could have let Project Helix fail. You could have watched Victor crash and burn. Why didn't you? Mason thought about Lily, about Mrs. Chen, about 7 years of being invisible. Because I'm tired of watching incompetent people succeed while good work gets buried, he said. And because maybe I wanted to prove I still know how to do this. Scarlett nodded slowly. Get some rest. We start at 7. What about my shift? I'm supposed to finish cleaning. Your shift just changed. She walked out. Mason sat alone in the war room. The sun was starting to rise, light crept across the city. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen. She's awake, wants pancakes. Told her you'd call. Mason dialed. Lily answered on the second ring. Daddy? Hey, sweetheart. Mrs. Chen says you're still at work. Yeah, something came up. Are you cleaning? Mason looked at the screens full of code, at the documentation that might save a company or destroy his life. Something like that. Can we have pancakes for dinner? Sure, baby, pancakes for dinner. With chocolate chips? Mason smiled despite everything. With chocolate chips. Okay, love you, Daddy. Love you too. He hung up and stared at the city waking up beyond the windows. Somewhere out there, people were heading to jobs where they mattered, where they were seen, where their work had value. For the first time in 7 years, Mason Carter was one of them, even if it only lasted 24 hours. At 6:52 a.m., Mason stood in front of a bathroom mirror on the executive floor, staring at a face that hadn't slept in 23 hours. His janitor uniform was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like exactly what he was, a broke single father who'd just bet everything on a company that had already destroyed him once. He splashed cold water on his face and tried to remember the last time he'd presented technical work to actual engineers. 3 years ago, maybe. A freelance gig fixing someone's database that paid $200 and led nowhere. Before that, it was 7 years of silence. His hands were shaking. The bathroom door opened and a man in an expensive suit walked in. He glanced at Mason, did a double take at the uniform, then proceeded to ignore him completely while checking his hair in the mirror. Mason dried his face and walked out. The war room had transformed. 6 engineers sat around the conference table with laptops open and coffee cups scattered like shell casings. They ranged from mid-20s to late 40s. All of them looked skeptical. Scarlett stood at the head of the table in a different outfit than 3 hours ago. Charcoal blazer, white shirt, looking every inch the CEO who'd gotten a full night's sleep instead of none. "Everyone's here," she said when Mason entered. "Let's begin." The engineers turned to look at him. Mason saw the exact moment they registered his uniform, saw their expression shift from curiosity to confusion to poorly hidden contempt. A woman in her 30s with sharp features and sharper eyes spoke first. "I'm sorry, is maintenance joining us?" "This is Mason Carter," Scarlett said. "He's the consultant I brought in to review Project Helix." "The consultant?" The woman's tone could have stripped paint. "In a janitor uniform. Rachel, I don't pay you to comment on dress code." Scarlett's voice was pleasant and absolute. "I pay you to verify technical claims, so let's focus on that." Rachel's jaw tightened, but she stayed quiet. Scarlett gestured to Mason. "Show them what you found." Mason connected his laptop to the main display. His documentation filled the screen. 11 pages of system failures, security vulnerabilities, and architectural disasters. "Project Helix has critical flaws in 7 major subsystems," Mason said. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. "Thread management creates race conditions under normal load. Memory allocation has leaks that will crash the system within 48 hours of sustained use. Database queries are structured so inefficiently that response times will be unusable at scale. Security protocols have vulnerabilities that would be exploited within days of public launch." He pulled up code samples. "These aren't theoretical problems. They're verifiable failures. Anyone in this room can check my work." A younger engineer named David leaned forward. "Can you walk us through the threading issues?" Mason did. He showed them the parallelization problems in the neural processing core. Showed them how Victor's modifications had created timing conflicts that would cause random failures impossible to debug in production. David's expression changed as he followed the logic. "Jesus, that would explain the intermittent crashes we've been seeing." "You've been seeing crashes?" Scarlett asked sharply. "For 3 weeks, Victor said they were hardware issues." "They're not hardware issues." Mason pulled up more examples. The pattern matches exactly with race conditions in the threading layer. Rachel was typing fast on her laptop. "I'm checking the codebase against your documentation." She sounded angry, like Mason existing was a personal insult. "If you're wrong about any of this—" "I'm not wrong. Check the commit history. Check the timestamps. Cross-reference with the crash logs David mentioned." The room went quiet except for the sound of fingers on keyboards. Mason watched 6 engineers verify his work, watched their faces change as they realized he was right about everything. An older engineer named Steven pulled up the security vulnerabilities. "These authentication bypasses, if this shipped, we'd be compromised in less than a week." "Minimum," Mason said. "Why didn't our security audit catch this?" Steven looked at Scarlett. "When was the last security audit?" she asked. Victor said he handled it internally. "Did anyone actually see the audit report?" Silence. Scarlett's expression went cold. "So we've been operating on trust. Perfect." Rachel looked up from her laptop. "The memory leaks are real. I'm running a trace now and it's bleeding resources exactly where he said it would." She sounded furious. "This is undergraduate level incompetence. How did this make it into production code?" "Because Victor Hale doesn't understand the systems he's responsible for," Mason said. "He's been coasting on stolen work for 7 years and nobody looked close enough to notice." "Stolen work?" Rachel's voice was ice. "That's a serious accusation coming from someone who showed up in a janitor uniform." "Rachel," Scarlett's tone was a warning. "No, I want to hear this." Rachel stood up. "You're telling us our CTO, someone with 20 years of industry experience, is incompetent? Based on what credentials? Where did you even come from?" Mason met her eyes. "I came from the night shift where I empty your trash cans. Before that, I came from a lawsuit I couldn't afford to win. And before that, I came from a coffee shop where I designed the architecture Victor built his career on." "Prove it," I already did. It's in the documentation I sent Scarlett. Time-stamped code repositories going back 9 years. Patent applications filed before Victor filed his. Original design documents. You want to verify my credentials? Start there. Rachel looked at Scarlett. Is this true? I've reviewed his evidence, Scarlett said carefully. It's compelling enough that I want independent verification, which is why you're all here. David pulled up something on his screen. I'm looking at the core architecture patents, the ones filed under Victor's name. He went quiet. And I'm looking at the cloud repository Mason just shared. Another pause. These are identical, except Mason's versions are dated 8 months earlier. Stephen checked the same files. His face went pale. The neural threading protocols, the adaptive learning algorithms, even the variable naming conventions match. This isn't coincidence. Rachel was reading fast. Mason watched her process it, watched her face shift from anger to shock to something else. If this is real, if Victor actually stole this, then we've been building the company's future on a foundation of fraud, Scarlett finished, which is why we need to fix this quietly and quickly before it becomes public knowledge. How? Rachel demanded. We launch in 6 weeks. You're talking about months of rewrites. I'm talking about triage, Scarlett said. We fix the critical failures. We patch the security holes. We stabilize enough to launch safely while rebuilding the deeper architecture in parallel. That's not possible. It's possible if we have the right team. Scarlett looked at Mason. Tell them your plan. Mason pulled up a project timeline he'd drafted at 5 a.m. while running on coffee and spite. We can't rebuild everything in 6 weeks, but we can fix the failures that will kill us. Priority 1 is thread safety. We rewrite the neural processing core with proper synchronization. That's 2 weeks of focused work with the right people. 2 weeks? Rachel laughed without humor. You think you can rewrite core systems in 2 weeks? I think I can rewrite them in 10 days if I have engineers who know what they're doing and don't waste time questioning every decision. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Engineers like who? Engineers like you, David, Stephen, people in this room who actually understand the code. Mason met her stare. I don't need people who trust me. I need people who can verify I'm right and move fast. David was nodding slowly. If we focus purely on the critical path, if we cut out meetings and approval chains and just let the engineering happen, it's still aggressive, Stephen said. But it's not impossible. Rachel looked at Scarlett. This is insane. You're betting the company on a janitor. He's not a janitor, Scarlett said quietly. He's an engineer who had his life stolen and had to survive however he could. And right now, he's the only person in this building who seems to understand what's actually broken. She paused. I'm making the call. Mason leads the technical rebuild. You 3 support him. We have 6 weeks to make this work. And Victor? Rachel asked. I'll handle Victor. The board won't like this. The board doesn't need to like it. They need results. Scarlett checked her watch. I have phone calls to make. Mason, you have a team now. Use them. Rachel, David, Stephen, you report to him for the next 6 weeks. If you have problems with that, there's the door. Nobody moved. Scarlett walked out. The room was silent for a long moment. Mason looked at 3 engineers who'd gone from skeptical to something else. Not quite acceptance. Not quite trust. Just the cold recognition that he'd been right about everything. Rachel broke the silence first. If we're doing this, we need workstations, access credentials, a proper project structure. Agreed, Mason said. And you need different clothes. No offense, but I can't take technical direction from someone dressed for the graveyard shift. Mason looked down at his uniform. Fair point. There's an executive locker room on this floor, David said. Pretty sure there are spare suits. You're probably Stephen's size. Stephen shrugged. Take whatever fits. I've got 6 identical suits at home. 20 minutes later, Mason stood in front of a different mirror wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than 3 months of his rent. It fit perfectly. He looked like someone who belonged on the executive floor, like someone whose opinions mattered. He hated how good it felt. His phone buzzed. Lily had texted a photo of herself eating cereal with the caption, Mrs. Chen says you are still at work. Mason texted back, big project, home tonight. Promise. With chocolate chip pancakes? With chocolate chip pancakes. When he returned to the war room, It had transformed again. Whiteboards were covered in diagrams. 3 additional workstations had appeared. Rachel was already deep in code, her laptop surrounded by empty coffee cups. "We've got a problem," she said without looking up. "What kind?" "Victor's been alerted about the board meeting postponement. He's asking questions. Wants to know what technical issue came up overnight." Mason's stomach dropped. "Did Scarlett respond?" "Not yet, but he's not stupid. He'll figure out someone accessed Project Helix after hours." Rachel finally looked at him. "When he does, this gets complicated fast." David pulled up access logs. "We can scrub the records, make it look like routine maintenance." "Don't," Mason said. "If we start covering tracks, it looks like we're hiding something illegal. Better to control the narrative." "What narrative?" Stephen asked. "You broke into a classified system." "I bypassed security to fix a critical failure that nobody else caught. That's either criminal trespass or emergency system maintenance. Depends on who's telling the story." Rachel almost smiled. "You've thought about this." "I've had 7 years to think about it." His phone rang. Unknown number. Mason answered. "Mason Carter?" A man's voice, smooth, confident, familiar in a way that made Mason's chest tighten. "Who is this?" "Victor Hale. I understand you've been making quite an impression this morning." The room went dead silent. Mason put the phone on speaker. "Mr. Hale," Mason said carefully. "What can I do for you?" "You can start by explaining why you accessed Project Helix without authorization." "I fixed a critical system failure. The project was crashing. Nobody else was available. A janitor fixed Project Helix." Victor's tone was amused, condescending. "That's the story you're going with?" "It's not a story. It's documented fact. The logs show you bypassed enterprise security at 2:17 a.m. and spent 40 minutes inside our most sensitive system. That's corporate espionage, Mr. Carter. That's a felony." Rachel was typing furiously. She pulled up something and showed Mason Victor's calendar. He was in the building, 3rd floor. "Where are you right now?" Mason asked. "That's not relevant." "It's relevant if you're about to walk into this war room and make accusations. You can't back up." A pause. "I'm heading to Scarlett's office. I suggest you meet me there in 10 minutes. We're going to discuss your very short future with this company." The line went dead. David looked at Mason. "He's going to try to get you arrested." "Probably." "What are you going to do?" Mason thought about it. About 7 years of running. 7 years of staying quiet. 7 years of letting Victor win. "I'm going to tell the truth," he said, "and let Scarlett decide what happens next." Rachel stood up. "We're coming with you." "You don't have to. We verified your work. All of it. If Victor wants to claim you're lying, he'll have to call us liars too." She grabbed her laptop. "And I've been waiting 3 years to tell that arrogant bastard he doesn't know what he's doing." Stephen and David stood too. "Guess we're doing this," Stephen said. They walked together down the executive hallway. Mason in a borrowed suit that fit like armor. 3 engineers who'd gone from skeptics to something like allies in the span of 2 hours. Past offices belonging to people who'd never noticed him. Past conference rooms where decisions about his life had been made without him. Scarlett's assistant looked up when they approached. "She's expecting you, but Mr. Hale is already inside." "Perfect," Rachel said. Mason opened the door. Victor Hale stood beside Scarlett's desk like he owned it. He was exactly how Mason remembered. Tall, handsome, expensive suit, smile that never reached his eyes. He'd gained weight in 7 years, softer around the edges. Success looked good on him. It always did on people who stole it. "Mason?" Victor's smile widened. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough." Scarlett sat behind her desk, looking calm and dangerous. "Victor, you wanted this meeting. Talk." "I wanted to discuss the security breach that happened last night." Victor gestured at Mason. "This man illegally accessed Project Helix. He bypassed classified systems. That's a fireable offense at minimum, likely criminal. He also fixed a critical failure your team couldn't solve in 9 weeks, Scarlett said. He had no authorization. He had a system that was crashing and no engineers available. He made a judgment call. It worked." Victor's expression hardened slightly. "With all respect, Scarlett, you don't understand the technical complexity here. Mason is maintenance staff. He has no training. I have training, Mason interrupted. I have 9 years of experience in adaptive AI systems. I have patents filed before you filed yours. I have code repositories that prove I designed the architecture you've been taking credit for. The room went very quiet. Victor recovered fast. That's a serious accusation, one you made 7 years ago and lost in court. I lost because I couldn't afford the lawyers you could, not because I was wrong. The court disagreed. The court accepted a settlement. That's not the same thing. Victor turned to Scarlett. This man is delusional. He sued me years ago claiming I stole his work. He lost. Now he's broken into our systems and he's trying to revive failed conspiracy theories to cover his crimes. Rachel stepped forward. I've reviewed his documentation. The code matches. The timestamps prove priority. Either you stole his work or you both independently invented identical systems 8 months apart using identical variable names. Victor's smile slipped. Who are you? Rachel Chen, senior engineer, and I've also reviewed the modifications you made to Project Helix last week. The ones that caused catastrophic system failures. The ones Mason had to fix because you don't actually understand the code you're responsible for. That's absurd, but is it? David pulled up his laptop. Because I'm looking at your commit history right now. You parallelized sequential operations. You created race conditions in the threading layer. You introduced memory leaks that would have crashed the system in production. He looked up. That's not expert engineering. That's someone who doesn't know what they're doing. Victor's face was changing color. Scarlett, I don't know what game this is, but I won't stand here and be insulted by junior engineers who don't understand. Explain the code, Mason said quietly. Victor stopped. What? The modifications you made last week. Explain your reasoning. Walk us through the technical decisions. Show us you understand what you built. I don't have to prove anything to you. You do if you want to keep your job, Scarlett said. Her voice was cold. Because right now, I have 4 engineers telling me you sabotaged our flagship product either through incompetence or malice. And I have documentation suggesting you built your career on stolen work. So yes, Victor, explain the code. Victor stared at her. Mason watched him calculate. Watched him realize the game had changed. This is a setup, Victor said finally. You brought in a disgruntled ex-employee to undermine me. You're manufacturing evidence. The evidence is in the commit logs, Stephen said. Time-stamped, verifiable. We're not manufacturing anything. Scarlett, I've given 8 years to this company. I've delivered results. I've brought in contracts worth hundreds of millions. And you're going to believe a janitor who broke into our systems? I'm going to believe the evidence, Scarlett said, which overwhelmingly suggests Mason is telling the truth. Victor's jaw tightened. If you do this, if you side with him, you'll destroy the company. The board won't accept it. Investors will panic. We'll lose everything. Or we'll lose a CTO who's been lying for 8 years and gain an engineer who can actually fix the problems. Scarlett stood up. Here's what's going to happen. You're taking a leave of absence, effective immediately, paid, pending investigation into the allegations against you. You can't do that. I can and I am. Security will escort you out. You'll surrender your access credentials and company devices. You'll have no contact with engineering staff. When the investigation concludes, we'll decide next steps. Victor looked at Mason, really looked at him. There was hatred in his eyes, and fear. You think you've won, Victor said. You haven't. I have lawyers, I have contracts, I have friends on the board who will bury you. Maybe, Mason said. But you don't have the truth, and eventually, that matters. Victor turned back to Scarlett. This is a mistake. When the board hears about this, the board will hear my version, supported by engineering reports and documented evidence. Scarlett walked to her door and opened it. Security is waiting. 2 security guards stood in the hallway. Victor looked at them, looked at Scarlett, looked at Mason. This isn't over, he said. Yes, Scarlett said quietly. It is. Victor walked out. The security guards followed. The door closed. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Rachel laughed, sharp and sudden. We just fired the CTO. We didn't fire him, Scarlett corrected. We placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. Same thing. Not legally. David was shaking his head. The board is going to lose their minds. Let them. Scarlett looked at Mason. Can you deliver? 6 weeks, full system stabilization. Can you actually do it? Mason thought about Lily, about Mrs. Chen, about 7 years in the dark. Yes, he said. Then you're officially Chief Architect of Project Helix. Temporary title pending board approval. Rachel, David, Stephen, you report directly to him. Whatever he needs, he gets. Questions? Rachel raised her hand. Does he get an actual office, or are we working out of the war room? War room for now. Offices are political. Let's focus on results. Fair enough. Scarlett checked her watch. I have 17 phone calls to make before the board meeting tomorrow. They're going to ask questions about the postponement. I need progress to show them. You'll have it, Mason said. Scarlett nodded and walked out, already dialing her phone. The engineers looked at Mason. So, Stephen said, Chief Architect. That's new. Temporary Chief Architect? Still. Hell of a promotion from the night shift. Mason couldn't help but smile. Yeah, it really is. Rachel pulled out her laptop. We should get started. 2 weeks to rewrite the threading core is aggressive even with optimistic estimates. Then we better be pessimistic and work faster. Mason headed for the door. I need to make a phone call. Give me 5 minutes. He stepped into the hallway and dialed Mrs. Chen. She answered on the third ring. Is Lily okay? Lily's fine. I need to ask a favor. Can you watch her tonight? Maybe tomorrow too. I'll pay double. What happened? You in trouble? Opposite of trouble. I got a job. A real one. Mrs. Chen was quiet. The cleaning job? Engineering job. At the same company. It's complicated. But it's real, and it might actually last. You need me to watch her while you work? Please. $60 a night, and you bring me those dumplings from the place on 5th. Deal. And Mason? Congratulations. It's about time something good happened. Mason hung up and stood in the hallway of a building where he'd been invisible for 6 years, where he'd emptied trash and cleaned floors and pretended not to exist. His phone buzzed. Lily. Mrs. Chen says you got a new job? Yeah, baby. New job. Does that mean more money? Maybe, eventually. Does that mean chocolate chip pancakes all the time? Mason laughed out loud. Let's start with tonight and see what happens. Okay, love you, Daddy. He put his phone away and walked back into the war room where 3 engineers were already arguing about threading protocols and memory allocation. Mason sat down at a workstation, opened Project Helix, looked at 3 million lines of code that needed fixing. All right, he said. Let's build something that actually works. Rachel glanced up. Where do we start? Mason pulled up the core architecture. We start by tearing out everything Victor built and replacing it with something that won't collapse the first time someone actually uses it. Aggressive. I like it. Good. Because we have 6 weeks to pull off something that should take 6 months. Mason looked at the team. So let's stop talking and start coding. They did. And somewhere 3 miles away, a 6-year-old girl ate cereal and dreamed about pancakes while her father rebuilt the future he'd lost 7 years ago. The board meeting started at 9 o'clock the next morning, and Mason wasn't invited. He sat in the war room with Rachel, David, and Stephen, staring at code while Scarlett walked into a conference room 3 floors down to face 12 people who could end her career with a single vote. They'd been coding for 19 straight hours. Mason's eyes burned. His borrowed suit smelled like coffee and stress. She's been in there for 40 minutes, David said, checking his watch for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Stop checking, Rachel muttered without looking up from her screen. It doesn't make time move faster. What do you think they're saying? Probably that she's lost her mind. Rachel typed something, deleted it, typed it again. That she fired the CTO based on the word of a janitor. That she's gambling the company on a stranger. She didn't fire him, Stephen said. Administrative leave. Tell that to the board. Mason's phone buzzed. Lily, Mrs. Chen made eggs. They're gross. Can you bring me McDonald's? He texted back, busy today, baby. Eat the eggs. They're so gross, Daddy. I'll bring McDonald's tomorrow. Promise. You always say tomorrow? Mason stared at the text. She was right. He did always say tomorrow. Tomorrow when he had money. Tomorrow when his shift ended early. Tomorrow when life stopped being an exhausting series of almosts. You okay? Rachel asked. Mason put his phone down. Fine. Where are we on the memory allocation? Almost done. Another 2 hours and we can run a full system test. Make it 1 hour. I want results before Scarlett comes back. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You know we've been awake for a full day, right? So is she. And she's defending us to people who think we're a liability. Mason pulled up the testing protocols. 1 hour. Then we show them something that actually works. They worked in silence, broken only by keyboard clicks, and the occasional muttered curse. Mason's head pounded. His hands ached. But the code was coming together, clean, efficient, the way it should have been built from the start. At 10:47, his phone rang. Scarlett. How close are you? She asked without preamble. Testing in 15 minutes. Why? Because I just spent 90 minutes explaining to the board why I removed our CTO without consulting them. They want proof, hard proof, and they want it today. Mason heard voices in the background, angry voices. Are they voting on your position? He asked quietly. A pause. Not yet. But Gerald Morrison just suggested I'm too inexperienced to handle crisis management. He's proposing a vote of no confidence. Can he do that? He can try. I've got enough support to block it for now, but Mason, I need you to deliver. If Project Helix doesn't work perfectly, I lose the vote and Victor comes back. It'll work. You're certain? Mason looked at the screens full of rewritten code, at 3 engineers who'd trusted him enough to work through the night. Yes. Then bring it to the boardroom. 30 minutes. Be ready to present. Scarlett, I can't present to the board. I'm not... You're the chief architect. Temporary or not, that's your title. You rebuilt the system. You need to defend it. Her voice softened slightly. I know what I'm asking, but I can't do this without you. The line went dead. Rachel was watching him. The board wants a presentation? In 30 minutes. We're not ready. We will be? Mason stood up. David, finish the memory optimization. Stephen, run diagnostic tests on the security protocols. Rachel, help me build a presentation that proves we're not insane. What should the presentation say? That Project Helix works, that we fixed it, that we're the reason this company isn't about to launch a disaster. Mason grabbed his laptop. And that Victor Hale is a fraud who nearly destroyed everything. Rachel smiled. Finally, something I can work with. 28 minutes later, Mason stood outside the boardroom wearing the same borrowed suit from yesterday and holding a laptop that contained either salvation or unemployment. His hands were shaking again. He couldn't make them stop. The door opened. Scarlett looked out. Ready? No. Good, neither am I. She held the door. Come on. The boardroom was exactly as intimidating as Mason expected. Mahogany table, leather chairs, 12 people in expensive suits who looked at him like he was something tracked in on someone's shoe. Gerald Morrison sat at the far end, late 60s, silver hair, expression like a hanging judge. He'd made his fortune in manufacturing before joining Apex's board 5 years ago. Word was he hated Scarlett, thought she was too young, too inexperienced, a diversity hire who'd inherited what she didn't earn. Mason recognized that look. He'd been getting it for 6 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Scarlett said, this is Mason Carter, Chief Architect for Project Helix. He's going to walk you through the technical issues we've resolved in the past 24 hours. The janitor, Morrison said. Not a question, a statement dripping with contempt. The engineer, Scarlett corrected, who fixed what our previous CTO broke. Alleged broke, another board member said. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes. Victor Hale has an impeccable reputation. Had, Rachel said from the doorway. She walked in carrying her laptop with David and Stephen behind her. Before we proved he was incompetent. Morrison's face darkened. Who authorized you to be here? I did, Scarlett said. They're the engineering team that verified Mason's work. If you have technical questions, they can answer them. This is highly irregular. So as discovering your CTO sabotaged your flagship product. But here we are. Scarlett gestured to Mason. Show them. Mason connected his laptop to the display. Project Helix's dashboard filled the screen. Every indicator green, every subsystem running smoothly. 48 hours ago, Mason began, Project Helix was in critical failure. The system was crashing every 11 minutes. Core algorithms were collapsing. We were weeks away from launching a product that would have destroyed this company's reputation and opened you to lawsuits worth hundreds of millions. He pulled up the error logs from 2 nights ago. Red text everywhere, cascading failures, system meltdown in progress. These failures were caused by modifications made by Victor Hale 8 days ago. He parallelized operations that required sequential processing, created race conditions in the threading layer, introduced memory leaks that would crash the system under normal load. Morrison leaned forward. You're saying Victor deliberately sabotaged Project Helix? I'm saying he modified code he didn't understand and created catastrophic failures as a result. Whether that's sabotage or incompetence is above my pay grade, but the result is the same. Mason showed them the code. Victor's changes highlighted in red, his own fixes in green. This is the neural processing core. Victor's implementation parallelized operations A, B, and C simultaneously. But C depends on the output of B, and B depends on A. By running them in parallel, he guaranteed data corruption. David stepped forward. We verified every claim Mason made. The threading problems were real. The memory leaks were real. The security vulnerabilities were real. Project Helix was a disaster waiting to happen. And now? Morrison asked. Mason switched to live system monitoring. Now it works. We rewrote the threading architecture, fixed the memory allocation, patched the security holes. The system has been running stable for 14 hours under simulated load. 14 hours is hardly a comprehensive test, the sharp-eyed woman said. It's 14 more hours than Victor's version ever achieved. Rachel pulled up comparison data. His code crashed every 11 to 18 minutes. Ours hasn't crashed once. Stephen added, we've also run penetration testing on the security protocols. The vulnerabilities Mason identified would have been exploited within days of launch. Our patches closed those holes. The board members looked at each other, whispering. Mason couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could read the body language. Some impressed, some skeptical. Morrison just looked angry. You're asking us to believe, Morrison said slowly, that a man with no credentials, no verifiable employment history, and a history of litigation against Victor Hale somehow fixed our most important project in a single day. I'm not asking you to believe anything, Mason said. I'm showing you documented proof. The code is verifiable. The tests are replicable. Anyone in this room with technical knowledge can check my work. I don't have technical knowledge. I have common sense, and common sense says this is a personal vendetta dressed up as engineering. Then verify it independently. Hire an outside firm. Bring in consultants. I'll give you every line of code I wrote. Mason met Morrison's eyes. Because I'm not afraid of scrutiny. Are you? The room went very quiet. Morrison's face flushed. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that if you're confident in Victor's competence, you should have no problem letting independent experts review his work. Mason pulled up the patent comparison Rachel had prepared. While they're at it, they can compare Victor's patents to the code repositories I filed 8 months before he filed his. They can verify the timestamps, check the commit history, validate that everything I've said is true. This is ridiculous, Morrison said. Scarlett, I move that we end this presentation and return to the matter at hand. Your unauthorized removal of a senior executive. It wasn't unauthorized, Scarlett said calmly. I have full authority to place staff on administrative leave pending investigation, which is exactly what I did, without consulting the board. The board doesn't manage day-to-day personnel decisions. I do. The CTO is hardly day-to-day personnel. He is when he's actively damaging the company. Scarlett stood up. Here's what's happening. We're going to hire an independent forensic firm to review all of Mason's claims. They'll verify the code, validate the patents, confirm the timeline. When they're done, we'll have objective proof of whether Victor Hale is a brilliant engineer or a fraud. And if the review proves Victor innocent, Morrison asked, then we reinstate him with an apology and I'll accept whatever consequences the board decides. Scarlett looked around the table. But if the review proves Mason right, Victor is terminated for cause and we move forward with the team that actually fixed the problem. A board member in his 40s raised his hand. What happens to Project Helix in the meantime? We continue development under Mason's leadership. We meet our launch deadline. We deliver a product that actually works. With a team led by someone we hired 48 hours ago. With a team led by someone who's already delivered more results than our previous CTO managed in 9 weeks. Scarlett gestured to the green dashboard. Look at the system. It works. That's not theory. That's reality. Morrison stood up. I'm calling for a vote. We either reinstate Victor Hale immediately, or we accept Scarlett's proposal for an independent review. I second the motion, sharp-eyed woman said. The vote happened quickly. Show of hands. Mason watched people decide his future in real time. 7 votes for the independent review. 4 for reinstating Victor. 1 abstention. Morrison's jaw clenched. Fine, hire your forensic team. But understand this, Scarlett. If you're wrong, if this is the personal crusade it appears to be, you're done. Not just as CEO, in this industry. I understand. And you? Morrison looked at Mason. If this review proves you fabricated evidence or falsified claims, I'll personally ensure you're prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Looking forward to it, Mason said. Morrison walked out. 3 other board members followed. The rest stayed behind, clustering around the presentation, asking technical questions. Rachel and David fielded them, while Stephen pulled up additional documentation. Scarlett touched Mason's arm. Outside, now. They stepped into the hallway. The door closed behind them. That was dangerous, Scarlett said. Morrison has enough influence to cause real problems. He was going to cause problems anyway. True, but you basically challenged him to a fight. He started it. Scarlett almost smiled. How are you this calm? I'm not. I'm terrified. But I've already lost everything once. There's not much left they can take. They can take your freedom. Morrison wasn't bluffing about prosecution. Neither was I about the evidence. Everything I showed them is true. The forensic review will prove it. Scarlett leaned against the wall. She looked exhausted. I just bet my career on you. I hope you realize that. I know. If the review goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, then we both lose. You lose your job. I lose my freedom. Lily loses her father. Mason's voice stayed steady. But that's not going to happen. Because I'm right. About all of it. Scarlett studied him. You're either the most confident person I've ever met, or the best liar. Can it be both? She laughed. Actually laughed. You're a strange person, Mason Carter. I get that a lot. Her phone rang. She glanced at it. The forensic firm I've used before. I should take this. Go. She answered and walked down the hall, already negotiating. Mason stood alone in the corridor watching executives pass by. Some ignored him. Some stared. A few whispered. He didn't care. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen, Lily wants to know if you're coming home tonight. Tell her I'll be there by 8 with McDonald's. She'll believe it when she sees it. I know. Mason went back to the war room. Rachel was already there, surrounded by energy drink cans. How'd it go after we left? Mason asked. 3 board members want detailed technical documentation. 2 want access to the source code. 1 asked if we were hiring. Rachel grinned. I think we convinced them. Morrison didn't look convinced. Morrison's an investor, not an engineer. He doesn't care about code. He cares about stock price and quarterly returns. Show him we can launch on time and he'll come around. Or he'll find another way to destroy us. Probably that one. Rachel pulled up a new screen. Speaking of destruction, we've got a problem. What kind? The kind where someone's been accessing our development server from an external IP. Started 3 hours ago. Whoever it is knows what they're looking for. Mason's stomach dropped. Show me. The log showed systematic access to Project Helix's codebase. Someone was downloading files. Lots of files. Core algorithms. Security protocols. Proprietary architecture. Can you trace the IP? Mason asked. David was already on it. It's bouncing through proxies, professional setup, but I can narrow the geographic region. He typed fast. Somewhere in the city. Maybe within a few miles. Victor, Rachel said. He's supposed to surrender his access credentials. He did, to his main account, but if he had backup credentials we didn't know about. Rachel pulled up the access patterns. This person knows exactly where to look. They're not searching, they're extracting specific files. Stephen joined them. If Victor's stealing the code base, he could sell it to competitors, David finished, or use it to build his own version, claim we stole from him. Mason's mind raced. Can we lock him out? Already trying, but he's using credentials I don't recognize, must be embedded deep in the system. Rachel's fingers flew across her keyboard. I'm changing root passwords, but if he's got access we don't know about. He could have planted back doors, Stephen said. Hidden accounts, dormant access points. Then we find them. Mason pulled up the server architecture. David, check the authentication logs for the past 6 months. Look for any credential creations that weren't properly documented. Rachel, audit the codebase for unauthorized access points. Stephen, work with me on mapping the system architecture. If Victor planted back doors, they'll have a signature. They worked fast. Mason's exhaustion disappeared behind adrenaline and rage. Victor was stealing from them. Again. The same play from 7 years ago. Take what wasn't his and run. Not this time. Found something, David said. 3 service accounts created 7 months ago, never properly logged. Low-level access that escalates to admin under specific conditions. That's our back door, Mason said. Kill them. On it. Rachel looked up from her screen. He's downloaded about 40% of the code base. Core algorithms, neural architecture, security implementations. Can we tell what he's planning to do with it? No, but if he's working with competitors... Mason's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Hello, Mason. Victor's voice, smooth as ever. Enjoying your moment in the spotlight? What do you want, Victor? Just calling to congratulate you. You really sold them on your little presentation. Very convincing. It wasn't a presentation. It was the truth. Your truth. My lawyers have a different version, one that involves corporate espionage, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to defraud. Mason put the phone on speaker. You're stealing our code right now. We're watching you do it. A pause. I have no idea what you're talking about. The external IP accessing our development server. The systematic extraction of proprietary algorithms. That's you. And we're documenting everything. Victor laughed. Good luck proving it. But that's not why I called. I called to give you a chance. A professional courtesy, you might say. I don't want your courtesy. You might want this one. Here's the situation. I have lawyers. Very good lawyers. They're preparing a lawsuit against you personally for defamation, fraud, and theft of trade secrets. We're also filing a criminal complaint for your illegal access to Apex systems. I fixed your mess. You committed corporate espionage, and when we're done, you'll be in prison and Scarlett will be out of a job. Unless. Unless what? Unless you disappear. Take whatever money she's paying you and walk away. Retract your statements about the patent theft. Admit you were mistaken. Do that, and I'll drop the charges. You can go back to your quiet life with your daughter. Mason's chest tightened. You're threatening my daughter? I'm protecting my reputation, which your daughter benefits from, incidentally, when her father isn't in prison. Rachel was typing furiously. She mouthed, keep him talking. And if I don't disappear? Mason asked. Then I destroy you. Again, just like last time. Except this time you won't walk away with a settlement. You'll walk away with a felony conviction. You're bluffing. Am I? I have 8 years of credibility at this company. Awards, published papers, patent filings. You have a night shift badge and a sob story. Who do you think they'll believe? David was writing something on a whiteboard. Got the IP location, apartment building, 2 miles from here. I think they'll believe the evidence, Mason said. The code that proves you stole my work. The forensic review that proves you're incompetent. The documentation that proves you sabotaged Project Helix. Documentation you had full access to modify. Evidence you could have fabricated. You really think a jury will believe a janitor over a respected CTO? I think a jury will believe time-stamped repositories and commit histories. I think they'll believe Rachel, David, and Stephen when they testify you don't understand your own code. Those 3 will say whatever Scarlett tells them to. She's paying them. She's paying them to tell the truth. Victor's voice hardened. Last chance, Mason. Walk away. Tonight. Or I bury you. Try it. Victor hung up. The war room was silent for a moment. Well, Rachel said. That was subtle. He's scared, Stephen observed. People don't threaten prison unless they're desperate. Mason looked at the IP trace on David's screen. Can we confirm it's actually him? Not without physical verification, but the location matches an address registered to a company Victor owns. Property records show it's a residential unit he uses as an office. So we know where he is and what he's doing. What we don't know is why. Mason pulled up the stolen files list. What's he planning to do with this code? Rachel scanned the list. If I wanted to cause maximum damage, I'd sell it to competitors before launch, destroy our market advantage, make Project Helix worthless before it even ships. Or he uses it to build his own version, David added. Beats us to market, claims we stole from him. Both scenarios end the same way, Stephen said. Apex loses, we lose, Victor wins. Mason's phone buzzed. Scarlett, forensic team starts Monday. Need you to prepare full documentation, every claim, every piece of evidence. He texted back. Victor just called. Threatened lawsuit and criminal charges. Also stealing code base from external IP. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Coming to war room now. 2 minutes later, Scarlett walked in. Tell me everything. Mason played her the recording. He'd started recording the moment he recognized Victor's voice. Old habit from the lawsuit days. Scarlett's expression darkened as she listened. He threatened your daughter. Implied threat. Technically legal. It's witness intimidation. His lawyers will say it was concern for my family. His lawyers can say whatever they want. This recording proves he's desperate. Scarlett looked at the IP trace. And you're certain he's stealing the code base? As certain as we can be without physically catching him, Rachel said. Then let's catch him. Everyone looked at her. You want to go to his apartment? David asked. I want to confirm what he's doing. If we can document active theft, that strengthens our position significantly. Scarlett checked her watch. It's 2:30. If he's downloading 40% of the code base, he'll need several more hours. We have time. This is crazy, Stephen said. If we're wrong, we're not wrong. Scarlett looked at Mason. Are we? Mason thought about it. About Victor's voice on the phone. About 7 years of running. About Lily asking why tomorrow never came. No, he said. We're not wrong. Then let's go prove it. They took Scarlett's car, a black Mercedes that probably cost more than Mason made in 5 years. Scarlett drove while Mason sat in the passenger seat, and Rachel, David, and Stephen crammed in the back with laptops. The address led to a modern building in a neighborhood Mason couldn't afford to walk through. Glass and steel, doorman out front, the kind of place where units started at $3 million. He's on the 8th floor, David said, checking property records. Unit 804. They parked across the street, watching the building. Mason felt absurd, like they were amateur detectives playing dress-up. What exactly is the plan? Rachel asked. We confirm he's there, document what we can, get evidence. Scarlett pulled out her phone. Then we call the police. The police won't care about code theft, Stephen said. They'll care about violation of a court order. Victor's leave conditions explicitly forbid accessing Apex systems or data. If he's actively stealing code, that's a breach. Mason's phone buzzed. Unknown number again. He answered. You're parked across the street, Victor said. I can see you from my window. Mason looked up. 8th floor, a silhouette in the window, watching them. You're stealing from us, Mason said. Prove it. We will. By then I'll be gone. And so will your code. Victor laughed. You should have taken my offer, Mason. Now you get nothing but legal bills and disappointment. Again. The silhouette moved away from the window. Scarlett was already calling someone. This is Scarlett Vaughn, CEO of Apex Dynamics. I need to report a theft in progress. She gave them the address. Explained the situation. Mason heard skepticism in her voice when she said, intellectual property theft. They're sending someone, Scarlett said after hanging up, but it could take an hour. This isn't exactly a priority. An hour is too long, Rachel said. She was typing on her laptop. He's accelerating the download. He knows we're here. He's trying to finish before we can stop him. Mason watched the building. 8th floor, Unit 804. Victor was up there right now, stealing what Mason had built, preparing to use it against him, just like last time. Something cold settled in Mason's chest. I'm going up there, he said. That's a terrible idea, Stephen said immediately. Probably, but I'm doing it anyway. Mason, if you confront him, Scarlett started. I'm not confronting him. I'm documenting. You have your phone. I have mine. We record everything. Get proof he's stealing. Then we have something real for the police. He could have you arrested for trespassing. Let him. I'd rather explain trespassing than watch him steal everything again. Scarlett looked at him. Really looked. Mason saw her calculating risk versus reward. If you do this, she said quietly, you do it smart. No confrontation, no physical contact, just document and leave. Understood. And take Rachel with you. 2 witnesses are better than 1. Rachel looked up from her laptop. I'm sorry, what? You're going with Mason. Keep your phone recording. Document everything. If Victor gets aggressive, you leave immediately. This is insane, Rachel said. Yes, Scarlett agreed. But so is everything else we've done in the past 48 hours. At least this way we get evidence. Mason was already opening his door. Coming? Rachel grabbed her laptop and followed. They crossed the street together. Mason's heart hammered. This was stupid, reckless, exactly the kind of impulsive decision that had ruined him last time. But he was tired of being careful. The doorman looked up as they approached. Can I help you? We're here to see Victor Hale, Mason said. Unit 804. Is he expecting you? Yes. The lie came easily. The doorman checked something on his screen and waved them through. They took the elevator to the 8th floor. Rachel had her phone out, recording. Mason did the same. For the record, Rachel said, I think this is a terrible idea. Noted. But also kind of exciting. Also noted. The elevator doors opened. Unit 804 was at the end of a hallway that probably cost more per month than Mason's yearly rent. Mason knocked. Victor opened the door. He looked the same as always, expensive casual wear, perfect hair. Smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him, Mason could see a laptop on a desk. Multiple screens, code scrolling across them. Mason, Victor said pleasantly, I told you I could see you from my window. I didn't expect you to actually come up. We need to talk. I don't think we do. Victor started to close the door. Mason put his hand against it. The police are on their way. You're stealing proprietary code in violation of your leave agreement. That's grounds for immediate termination and legal action. I'm accessing files I created. That's not theft. You didn't create them. You modified work that was already there. Work that was mine. Mason kept his voice level. And you're downloading them to external storage. That's theft. Victor glanced at Rachel, at her phone, recording everything. You're documenting this? He asked. Yes, Rachel said. That's illegal. This is my private residence. You're trespassing and recording without consent. Actually, under state law, only one party needs to consent to recording. I consent. Rachel kept her phone steady. And we're in the hallway, which is common space. So technically, we're not trespassing. Victor's smile tightened. Clever, but also meaningless. Even if you document me accessing Apex servers, which you can't prove without seeing my screen, it proves nothing. I have legitimate reasons to access files I worked on. Not under the terms of your administrative leave, Mason said. You surrendered your credentials. Any access is unauthorized. I surrendered my main credentials. I never agreed to surrender personal backups or archived work. Archived work that's downloading right now from active Apex servers. Victor's expression shifted, just slightly, enough to tell Mason he'd hit the truth. Last chance, Victor said quietly. Walk away. Both of you. Or I make one phone call and have you arrested for harassment, trespassing, and corporate espionage. Make the call, Mason said. I'll wait. They stared at each other. 7 years of history in that look. 7 years of theft and lies and stolen futures. Victor pulled out his phone. Then Rachel's laptop started beeping. He's done, she said, staring at her screen. The download just completed. All core files extracted to external storage. Victor smiled. Goodbye, Mason. Enjoy your very short career at Apex. He closed the door. Mason and Rachel stood in the hallway, recording, documenting, watching a door close on evidence they couldn't quite prove. We didn't get enough, Rachel said. We got him admitting he accessed files. We got him confirming he has external backups. We got timestamps matching the download. A lawyer will shred that in court. Maybe, but it's more than we had before. They took the elevator down, crossed the street, got back in the Mercedes where Scarlett, David, and Stephen were waiting. "Did you get it?" Scarlett asked. Mason plugged his phone into her car's display, played the recording. When it finished, Scarlett was quiet for a long moment. "It's not enough," she said finally. "I know. But it's something." "It is." "And the police?" As if on cue, a patrol car pulled up to the building. 2 officers got out. "That'll be them," Scarlett said. She opened her door. "Wait here." They watched her approach the officers, watched her show them something on her phone, watched them talk. 10 minutes of conversation that ended with the officers going inside and Scarlett returning to the car. "They're going to knock on his door, ask some questions. Probably won't accomplish much, but it puts him on record." "He'll just lie," David said. "Of course he'll lie. But now there's a police report documenting our complaint. That matters for the forensic review." Mason's phone buzzed. "Mrs. Chen, it's 7:45. You said you'd be home by 8. Lily is waiting." He checked the time. 7:46 p.m. "I need to go," Mason said. Scarlett looked at him. "It's been a long day. 43 hours. But who's counting? Go home. Be with your daughter. We'll handle the rest tonight." "You sure?" "The police will file their report. The forensic team starts Monday. Victor made his move. Now we make ours." She started the car. "Where do you live?" Mason gave her his address. She drove him across the city to a neighborhood that looked nothing like where they'd just been. Old buildings, cracked sidewalks, the McDonald's on the corner with the broken M. "This is me," Mason said when she pulled up. Scarlett looked at the building, at the graffiti on the wall, at Mrs. Chen visible through a window watching TV. "You've been living here while working nights?" "For 6 years. And raising a daughter. Her name's Lily." Scarlett nodded slowly. "Go, spend time with her. Tomorrow we figure out how to beat Victor." Mason got out, grabbed McDonald's from the corner. Chicken nuggets and fries that were probably cold by now, but Lily wouldn't care. He climbed 3 flights of stairs and opened the door to find his daughter asleep on the couch, with Mrs. Chen snoring beside her. Lily's hair was messy. Her dinosaur blanket had fallen on the floor. She looked exactly like her mother used to look when she slept. Mason picked up the blanket and covered her. Lily's eyes opened. "Daddy?" "Hey, baby. You came home." "I promised." "You brought McDonald's?" "In the bag." She sat up, rubbed her eyes. "Mrs. Chen said you got a real job now." "Yeah, I did." "Does that mean we're not poor anymore?" Mason's chest tightened. "It means things might get better, eventually." "Good, because Sophie says poor people are sad and I don't want you to be sad." "I'm not sad, sweetheart." "Promise?" Mason pulled her close. "Promise." They ate cold chicken nuggets together while Mrs. Chen woke up and collected her money and shuffled back to 4B. Lily talked about school and her friend Sophie and how the teacher said she was good at math. Mason listened and tried not to think about Victor or the board or the forensic review that would decide his future. For 20 minutes, he was just a dad eating McDonald's with his daughter. Then Lily fell asleep again, and Mason carried her to their shared bed and tucked her in. He sat in the dark apartment staring at his phone, at the recording of Victor, at the evidence that wasn't quite enough. His phone buzzed. "Scarlett. Police filed the report. Won't lead to charges, but it's documented. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start preparing for the forensic review." Mason texted back. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet. We haven't won. But we're fighting. That's more than I've been able to do in 7 years. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Get some sleep, Mason. Monday, we prove you're right about everything." Mason put his phone down and lay beside his daughter in a bed that was too small for both of them in an apartment that cost too much for what it was. But for the first time in 7 years, he fell asleep believing tomorrow might actually be different. Mason woke to his daughter poking his face at 6 in the morning. "Daddy, you're still here." He opened his eyes. Lily was inches from his nose, examining him like he might disappear if she looked away. "Where else would I be?" he mumbled. "Work. You're always at work." "Not always." "Almost always." She climbed over him to get out of bed. "Mrs. Chen says your new job is important. Is it?" Mason sat up, His back ached from the terrible mattress. His head pounded from 3 hours of sleep. Yeah, baby, it's important. More important than making pancakes? Nothing's more important than pancakes. Lily grinned and ran to the kitchen. Mason followed and made chocolate chip pancakes on their single working burner while his daughter talked about a field trip to the zoo that cost $12 per student. $12 he didn't have last week. Might have this week. Maybe. Can I go? Lily asked, watching him flip pancakes. When is it? 2 weeks. Sophie's mom already paid. Sophie says I probably can't go because we're poor. Mason's jaw tightened. Sophie's mom should mind her business. So I can go? Yes. You can go. Lily hugged his leg. Thanks, Daddy. They ate pancakes together while morning light crept through their one window that faced a brick wall. Mason's phone buzzed constantly. Rachel sending code updates. David asking about security protocols. Stephen forwarding meeting requests. And Scarlett, just once. Forensic team arrives at 9 a.m. Be ready. At 7:30, Mason walked Lily to the bus stop 2 blocks away. She held his hand the whole way, chattering about the zoo and Sophie and her math homework. Other parents waited at the stop. They looked at Mason in his borrowed suit that he'd slept in and probably thought he was trying too hard. Let them think whatever they wanted. The bus came. Lily climbed on and waved from a window. Mason waved back until the bus turned the corner. Then he walked to the subway and rode across the city to a building where 3 days ago he'd been invisible. The war room had been claimed by the forensic team. 4 people in business casual with laptops and serious expressions. The lead investigator was a woman in her 50s named Patricia Chen, who looked like she'd spent her entire career finding lies in code. Mr. Carter, she said when Mason entered, we've reviewed your initial documentation. We have questions. For the next 6 hours, Patricia and her team tore apart every claim Mason had made. They verified timestamps, cross-referenced repositories, examined commit histories, asked him to explain technical decisions he'd made 7 years ago like they'd happened yesterday. Mason answered everything. Rachel, David, and Stephen sat nearby, ready to verify his work on Project Helix. Scarlett appeared periodically, watching from the doorway like a general surveying a battlefield. At 2 p.m., Patricia called a break. Initial findings, she said, looking at her notes. Your patent applications predate Victor Hale's by an average of 8 months. The code architecture is substantively identical. Variable naming conventions match. Comments in your repositories correspond to comments in his patent filings. So I'm right, Mason said. So far, the evidence supports your claims. But we're not done. We need to interview Mr. Hale, review his documentation, examine his version of events. He'll lie. Probably, but we'll know if he does. Patricia closed her laptop. We're also reviewing the Project Helix modifications, the ones you claim caused system failures. They did cause failures. We documented everything. We'll verify that independently. If your fixes work and his modifications don't, that supports incompetence. If we find evidence you sabotaged his code to make yourself look better, that's fraud. Rachel stood up. We can prove every fix we made. The testing logs are clean. The code speaks for itself. Code can be manipulated, Patricia said. Logs can be fabricated. We verify everything. She left with her team. The war room emptied. Mason sat alone staring at screens full of code he'd written when he still believed hard work mattered more than connections. You okay? Scarlett appeared in the doorway. Tired. Patricia's thorough. That's good for us. Unless she decides I'm lying, she won't, because you're not. Scarlett sat across from him. But even if the forensic review proves everything, we still have problems. Victor, Morrison, the board members who think I'm gambling the company on sentiment. She rubbed her eyes. I got 3 calls this morning from investors asking if the rumors are true, that we fired our CTO based on conspiracy theories. They're not rumors if they're true. They're rumors until the forensic report says otherwise, and that takes time we don't have. Scarlett pulled up something on her phone. Launch is in 5 weeks. Marketing has already started the campaign. Pre-orders are live. If we delay now, we lose everything. If we launch broken, we lose more. I know, which is why you need to finish stabilizing Project Helix. Patricia's review will take at least 2 weeks. We can't wait for her findings to move forward. Mason looked at the code on his screen. 3 million lines. Weeks of work remaining, 5 weeks until launch. It's not enough time, he said. Then we make it enough. You said you could do this. I said I could fix the critical failures. I didn't say I could make it perfect. Perfect isn't the goal. Working is the goal. Can you deliver that? Mason thought about Lily, about the field trip that cost $12, about 7 years of almosts and maybes and tomorrows that never came. Yes, he said, I can deliver that. Good, because I just got word Victor's filing a lawsuit against you personally, defamation, tortious interference, fraud. Mason's stomach dropped. When? Papers were filed this morning. You'll be served probably today, maybe tomorrow. I can't afford a lawyer. The company will cover it. This lawsuit is retaliation for exposing his fraud. We're not letting you face it alone. Morrison won't like that. Morrison doesn't get a vote. Scarlett stood up. Focus on the code. Let me handle the lawyers and the board and Victor's theatrics. You just build something that works. She left. Mason sat in the war room surrounded by evidence of everything he'd lost and everything he might get back. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Mason Carter? A different voice. Professional. Clipped. Who's asking? Courier service. I have legal documents for you. Are you at Apex Dynamics, 1847 Financial Boulevard? Yeah. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Mason looked at his phone, at the screen full of code, at the war room that had become his life for the past 72 hours. Rachel walked in carrying coffee. You look like you're about to throw up. Victor's lawsuit. I'm getting served in 20 minutes. Oh. She set the coffee down. That's less fun. Yeah. You know he's just trying to scare you, right? Make you back down. I know. So don't. I'm trying not to. Rachel pulled up a chair. When I was in grad school, my advisor stole my research, published it under his name. I reported him. He had tenure and connections. I had student debt and no references. Guess who won? Him. I dropped out. Worked tech support for 3 years before Scarlett hired me. I spent those 3 years thinking I should have stayed quiet, should have let him win. Rachel looked at Mason. Then I met you and watched you fix in one night what we couldn't fix in 9 weeks. And I realized something. What? Sometimes the person who got screwed is actually the person who deserved to win. Sometimes fighting back isn't stupid. It's just late. She stood up. So get served. Get sued. Let Victor throw everything he's got at you, because we're going to prove him wrong about all of it. She walked out. Mason sat with her words echoing in his head until a courier in a uniform arrived, with an envelope that probably weighed 3 ounces and felt like 1,000 pounds. Mason Carter? That's me. Sign here. Mason signed, took the envelope. The courier left. Inside was a lawsuit claiming Mason had defamed Victor Hale, interfered with his business relationships, and committed fraud by fabricating evidence. It demanded $2 million in damages plus legal fees plus a public retraction of all statements. $2 million. Mason laughed. Actually laughed. Because he had $1,700 in his checking account and a 6-year-old who needed $12 for a field trip. $2 million was so absurd it wrapped back around to funny. His phone rang. Scarlett. You got served, she said. How'd you know? Victor's lawyer called to gloat. I'm forwarding you to our legal team. They'll handle it. Scarlett, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. This lawsuit is corporate warfare dressed up as personal grievance. We treat it like what it is. Thank you. Thank me by finishing Project Helix. She hung up. Mason looked at the lawsuit, at the screens full of code, at a future that was either about to open up or collapse completely. Then he got to work. The next 12 days blurred together. Mason rewrote core systems while Patricia's team investigated in the background. He worked 16-hour days, went home long enough to make Lily dinner and help with homework, slept 4 hours, came back and did it again. Rachel, David, and Stephen kept pace. They stopped going home entirely, set up cots in unused offices, showered in the executive gym, lived on coffee and takeout and the belief that what they were building mattered. Scarlett appeared at odd hours, 2 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, always working, always on calls, fighting battles. Mason couldn't see with board members and investors and lawyers. On day 7, Patricia called Mason into a conference room. "We've completed the patent analysis," she said. "Your repositories prove prior invention. Victor's patents should never have been granted. We're recommending Apex file to have them invalidated." "And the Project Helix modifications?" "Catastrophic. His changes would have caused exactly the failures you described. Your fixes were necessary and correct." Patricia looked at him over her glasses. "You were right about everything." Mason felt something release in his chest. "So what happens now?" "Now we finish the investigation. Interview more witnesses, build an airtight case, then we present findings to the board." She paused. "But unofficially, you won. Victor Hale's career at Apex is over." Mason left the conference room and found Scarlett in her office on a phone call that sounded like an argument. She saw him and held up one finger. "I don't care what Morrison thinks," she said into the phone. "The forensic evidence is clear. Victor goes. End of discussion." She listened. "Then let him call a vote. I'll win." She hung up and looked at Mason. "Patricia told you?" "Yeah." "Good. Because we need to accelerate the timeline. Victor knows the investigation is going badly. He's getting desperate." "How desperate?" "He's shopping the stolen code to competitors. We've had 3 inquiries in the past week from companies that shouldn't know Project Helix exists." Mason's hands clenched. "He's selling it." "Trying to. So far nobody's buying. But if he finds the right buyer before we launch, they could beat us to market with our own product." "Can we stop him?" "Legally. We're filing injunctions, but that takes time. Realistically, we beat him by launching first." Scarlett pulled up a calendar. "We've got 23 days. Can Project Helix be ready?" Mason thought about the remaining work, the testing needed, the bugs still hiding in code they hadn't stress tested. "It'll be tight," he said. "That's not an answer." "Then yes, it'll be ready." "Good. Because I'm scheduling the final board presentation for 3 days before launch. You're going to demonstrate a fully functional system, prove we can deliver, prove Victor was wrong." She looked at him. "Can you handle that? Do I have a choice?" "No, but I'm asking anyway." Mason smiled despite himself. "Yeah, I can handle it." Over the next 2 weeks, the war room became the center of Mason's universe. They ran tests 24 hours a day, found bugs, fixed them, found more, fixed those. The system slowly stabilized like a patient coming out of a coma. Rachel worked beside Mason most nights, debugging algorithms at 3 in the morning while eating cold pizza. They didn't talk much, didn't need to, just passed code back and forth like jazz musicians trading solos. "You know what's weird?" she said one night. "What?" "A month ago I was bored, doing maintenance work on Victor's mess, counting days until I could quit." She pulled up a particularly elegant fix Mason had written. "Now I'm excited to come to work. Haven't felt that since grad school. Before your advisor screwed you." "Yeah. Before that?" Rachel smiled. "Thanks for that, by the way." "For what?" "Reminding me why I got into this, before the politics and the backstabbing, when it was just about building something that worked." Mason looked at the code on his screen, at the system they'd rebuilt from broken pieces. "Yeah, I needed that reminder too." On day 19, Lily's field trip happened. Mason took the morning off, the first time he'd left the building during daylight hours in 2 weeks. He met her class at the zoo and spent 4 hours watching his daughter point at elephants and lions and penguins like each one was a miracle. Sophie's mom was there. She looked at Mason like she smelled something rotten. "I didn't think you'd make it," she said. "Lily said you've been working a lot." "I made time." "Must be nice, having a flexible schedule." Mason didn't take the bait, just smiled and walked away. At the penguin exhibit, Lily grabbed his hand. "Sophie's mom is mean." "Yeah, she is." "Why?" "Some people are mean because they're unhappy. Some people are just mean." "Which one is she?" "Both, probably." Lily thought about that. "Are you happy, Daddy?" Mason looked at his daughter, at the zoo around them, at a life that was still hard, but maybe getting less hard. "Yeah, baby, I think I am." That night he returned to Apex and worked until 4 in the morning. Scarlett found him asleep at his desk at 6 and threw a blanket over him without waking him up. When Mason woke at 8, there was a note. Final board presentation tomorrow. Be ready. S. Tomorrow was supposed to be day 21. They'd bumped it up. Mason's heart hammered. He pulled up the system status, ran diagnostics, everything green, everything functional. But was it enough? Rachel appeared with coffee. You see Scarlett's note? Yeah. We ready? Mason ran another diagnostic, checked error logs, scanned performance metrics. I think so, he said. You think or you know? I know we've done everything we can. I know the system works. I know it's better than anything Victor built. He looked at her. But I also know boards don't care about better. They care about safe. Then we show them safe. We run the most boring, stable demonstration they've ever seen. No risks, no flourishes, just solid engineering that proves we can launch on time. David and Stephen joined them. We're running the final stress test, David said. If it passes, we're golden. They gathered around the main display and launched the test. Project Helix under maximum simulated load. Every subsystem pushed to its limit. For 90 minutes, they watched data scroll past while their hearts tried to escape their chests. At minute 87, a warning appeared. Minor memory fluctuation in the caching layer. That's fine, Rachel said, within normal parameters. At minute 90, the warning cleared. At minute 93, the test completed. 0 crashes, 0 errors, full functionality maintained. Stephen started laughing. David whooped. Rachel just stared at the screen like she couldn't believe it was real. We did it, she said quietly. We actually did it. Mason felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years. Not hope. Stronger than hope. Certainty. Yeah, he said. We did. That night, Mason went home and made spaghetti for Lily. She talked about the penguins and how Sophie had cried when she saw the snakes. They did her math homework together. Mason read her 3 chapters of a book about dragons. When she fell asleep, he sat in the dark apartment and thought about tomorrow, about walking into a boardroom and proving Victor wrong, about winning after 7 years of losing. His phone buzzed. Scarlett, get some sleep. Tomorrow, we change everything. Mason texted back. Already changed. Tomorrow we just make it official. He slept 6 hours, the most he'd slept in 3 weeks. The boardroom was packed. All 12 board members, Patricia and her forensic team, Scarlett's lawyers. And in the back corner, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, Victor Hale. His presence was a surprise. Apparently the board had insisted, wanted both sides represented. Victor met Mason's eyes across the room. No smile this time, just cold hatred. Morrison called the meeting to order at exactly 9 o'clock. We're here to review the forensic investigation into allegations against Victor Hale and to assess the current status of Project Helix. He looked at Patricia. Let's start with your findings. Patricia stood, clicked through a presentation that methodically destroyed Victor's credibility. Patent comparisons. Code analysis. Timeline documentation. By slide 12, several board members were shifting uncomfortably. By slide 20, Morrison's face had gone pale. In conclusion, Patricia said, our investigation confirms Mason Carter is the original inventor of the core technology Victor Hale patented. The evidence is conclusive and legally actionable. We recommend Apex immediately file to invalidate Mr. Hale's patents and pursue recovery of compensation paid to him based on fraudulent claims. The room was silent. Morrison looked at Victor. Do you have a response? Victor stood slowly. This investigation was compromised from the start, conducted by a team chosen by Scarlett Vaughn, who has obvious bias. The evidence has been selectively presented to support a predetermined conclusion. The evidence is time-stamped and verified, Patricia said coldly. We didn't selectively present anything. We presented facts. Facts that can be manipulated, code repositories that can be backdated, documents that can be fabricated. Victor looked at the board. I've given 8 years to this company. I've delivered results, and you're going to destroy my career based on the word of a janitor who broke into our systems? Former janitor, Scarlett said. Current chief architect who fixed the mess you created. Alleged mess. Documented mess. Scarlett nodded at Mason. Show them. Mason connected his laptop to the main display. Project Helix loaded on screen. Green across the board. 3 weeks ago, Mason said, this system was crashing every 11 minutes. Victor's modifications had created catastrophic failures in 7 major subsystems. We've repaired all of them. The system has been stable for 19 days. We've run stress tests simulating 10 times our expected launch load. 0 failures. He pulled up the comparison data. Victor's version in red, their version in green. This is the threading architecture Victor built. It parallelized sequential operations, guaranteed data corruption under load, and made debugging impossible. Mason switched to his rewrite. This is the corrected version. Proper synchronization, clean error handling, maintainable structure. He walked them through each fix, each improvement, each place where Victor's incompetence had nearly destroyed the company. Board members asked questions. Mason answered them, clearly, confidently, like he'd been presenting to boards his entire life instead of emptying their trash cans. When he finished, Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Hale," he said finally, "do you have technical rebuttals to these claims?" Victor stood. "The modifications I made were standard optimizations. Any competent engineer would recognize." "Explain the threading implementation," Mason interrupted. "Walk us through your technical reasoning." Victor's jaw tightened. "I don't need to justify my engineering decisions to you." "You do if you want to keep your job." "I don't have to prove anything. My record speaks for itself." "Your record is based on stolen work," Rachel said from the side of the room. "And when you actually had to engineer something yourself, you failed, repeatedly." Victor turned on her. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? I've been cleaning up your code for 3 years. I've seen every shortcut, every hack, every place where you didn't understand what you were doing." Rachel pulled out her laptop. "Want me to walk the board through the memory leaks you introduced? The security vulnerabilities? The database queries so inefficient they'd bring the system to its knees?" "This is character assassination. This is evidence." Scarlett stood. "And I'm calling for a vote. Victor Hale is terminated for cause. Fraudulent patent claims, incompetent engineering, attempted theft of proprietary code, all documented, all verified." Morrison looked around the table. "Discussion?" The sharp-eyed woman raised her hand. "I move we accept the forensic findings and terminate Mr. Hale's employment, effective immediately." "Second," another board member said. "All in favor?" 10 hands went up. 2 abstained, Morrison and 1 other. Nobody voted against. Motion carries. Morrison looked at Victor. "You're terminated. Security will escort you out. You'll receive severance as outlined in your contract, pending legal proceedings regarding the fraud allegations." Victor's face went red. "This is a mistake. All of you will regret this." "The only mistake," Scarlett said quietly, "was trusting you in the first place." Security appeared at the door. Victor walked out with his head high and his career in ruins. The door closed. Morrison turned to Mason. "You're the permanent chief architect, effective immediately. Rachel Chen is promoted to director of engineering. Report to Miss Vaughn." Rachel's eyes went wide. Mason couldn't help but smile. "Project Helix launches in 18 days, Morrison continued. "Can you deliver?" "Yes," Mason said. "You're certain?" "Completely." Morrison nodded. "Then this meeting is adjourned." The board filed out. Patricia and her team left with promises to send final documentation. Soon it was just Scarlett, Mason, Rachel, David, and Stephen. "Well," Rachel said, "that happened." "That happened," Scarlett agreed. She looked exhausted and relieved, and something else Mason couldn't quite name. David was grinning. "We just fired the CTO and promoted the janitor. This is the best thing that's ever happened." "Former janitor," Mason corrected. "Right. Current chief architect who's about to launch the biggest product in company history." David shook his head. "Man, what a month." Stephen clapped Mason on the shoulder. "Drinks tonight? Actual celebration?" Mason thought about it. About Lily waiting at home. About Mrs. Chen charging $60 he now could actually afford. "Rain check," he said. "I need to tell my daughter her dad just got a real job." "Fair enough." They walked out together. Down the hallway where Mason used to push a cleaning cart. Past offices where people now nodded at him instead of looking through him. Into an elevator where he pressed the button for the executive floor instead of the basement. Scarlett rode down with him to the lobby. "Thank you," Mason said as the doors opened. "For what?" "For trusting me, when you had no reason to." Scarlett smiled. "I had plenty of reasons. You were right. You were capable. and you gave me a way to fix a company that was breaking. She paused. But you're welcome anyway. Mason walked out into afternoon sunlight. The city looked the same as always, same traffic, same crowds, same broken sidewalks. But everything felt different. He took the subway home, climbed 3 flights of stairs, opened the door to find Lily doing homework at their tiny table. "Daddy!" She jumped up. "You're home early. I wanted to tell you something." "What?" "I'm not a janitor anymore. I'm chief architect at Apex Dynamics. It's an important job. It pays real money, and it means things are going to get better." Lily processed this. "Does that mean we can move?" "Eventually. Maybe." "Does that mean I can get new shoes?" "Definitely." "Does that mean chocolate chip pancakes whenever I want?" Mason laughed. "Let's not get crazy." Lily hugged him tight. "I'm proud of you, Daddy." Mason's throat tightened. "Thanks, baby." That night they ate pizza from the good place instead of the cheap place. Lily talked about her math test and her friend Sophie and how the teacher said she might skip a grade. Mason listened and realized this was what winning felt like. Not the boardroom, not the title, not even defeating Victor. This, right here. His daughter happy and fed and believing her father could do impossible things. His phone buzzed one last time. Scarlett. 18 days? Don't screw it up. Mason smiled and texted back. Wouldn't dream of it. The 18 days before launch passed like a fever dream. Mason moved through them in a haze of code reviews, system tests, and increasingly panicked meetings with marketing teams who kept asking if he was absolutely sure nothing would break. He wasn't absolutely sure of anything except that uncertainty was part of building something new. "You need to sound more confident," Scarlett told him after one particularly tense meeting with investors. "When you say probably and should work, they hear maybe and might explode. I'm an engineer, not a salesman. You're chief architect of a company launching a product in 11 days. That makes you both." Mason tried to be both. It didn't come naturally. He kept catching himself adding caveats and qualifiers, while marketing executives stared at him like he was deliberately trying to tank their jobs. Rachel started sitting in on his presentations to translate engineering honesty into corporate confidence. "What Mason means," she'd say after he'd explain a potential edge case scenario, "is that we've stress-tested extensively and the system performs within all acceptable parameters." "That's what I said." "You said theoretically stable under most conditions we've simulated. Not the same thing." Meanwhile, Victor's lawsuit ground forward in the background like a slow-moving disaster. Depositions were scheduled, discovery requests filed. Mason spent 4 hours with Apex's lawyers preparing testimony for a trial that might not happen for months. "He's trying to drag this out," the lead attorney explained. "A woman named Karen Reeves who charged $600 an hour and looked like she enjoyed crushing people professionally. Make it expensive, make it public, force a settlement." "I'm not settling." "Good, because we have him dead to rights on the patent fraud. The forensic evidence is bulletproof, but he knows if he can create enough noise, enough doubt, some of it sticks." "So what do we do?" "We launch Project Helix. We make it successful. We prove you're legitimate and he's desperate. Then we bury him." 6 days before launch, Lily's school called. She'd gotten in a fight with Sophie. Mason left a meeting about server infrastructure to pick her up from the principal's office. Lily sat in a chair too big for her with red eyes and crossed arms. "What happened?" Mason asked. "Sophie said you're a liar, that you don't really have an important job, that you're still just a janitor pretending." Mason's chest tightened. "What did you say?" "I said my daddy is chief architect, and he's launching a big project, and he's smarter than her dumb mom. Then I pushed her." "Lily, she was being mean." The principal, a tired woman in her 50s, looked at Mason over reading glasses. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for physical altercations." "I understand. It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't." Lily's suspended for the rest of the day. She paused. "For what it's worth, Sophie's mother has been saying some unkind things at pickup. I've spoken to her about it." Mason took Lily home. They sat on the couch together while she cried into his borrowed suit jacket that he now owned because Scarlett had told him to keep it. "I'm sorry I pushed her," Lily said. "I know. But she was lying about you." "She wasn't lying. She just didn't know the truth changed." Mason pulled her close. "A month ago I was a janitor. That was true. Now I'm not. That's also true. People don't always keep up with the truth when it changes fast. So I should have just let her say mean things? No, you should have told her she was wrong and walked away. Fighting doesn't prove you're right, it just proves you're angry. Lily thought about this. Are you angry? At the people who said mean things about you? Mason thought about Victor, about Morrison, about 7 years of people looking through him. Sometimes, he admitted. But being angry doesn't fix anything. Building something good fixes things. Proving you're capable fixes things. Anger just makes you tired. You sound like a teacher. I sound like someone who learned the hard way. They ordered Chinese food and watched a movie about talking animals. Lily fell asleep halfway through. Mason carried her to bed and returned to find Rachel had texted, "Crisis. Come back when you can." He called Mrs. Chen. She grumbled but agreed to come over. Mason took the subway back to Apex at 8 p.m. and found the war room in chaos. Load balancing is failing, David said without preamble. We're getting intermittent crashes under simulated peak traffic. Mason pulled up the logs. The system was stable under normal load but buckled when traffic spiked above a certain threshold. They'd tested this scenario. It had worked fine. What changed? He asked. Nothing. That's the problem. Same code, same configuration. It just started failing 2 hours ago. Mason dug into the architecture, found the bottleneck in the request routing layer. Traffic spikes were overwhelming the load balancer because they'd optimized for sustained load, not sudden spikes. It's a scaling issue, he said. We configured for gradual ramp-up. If launch traffic hits all at once, we crash, Rachel finished. Spectacular public failure on day one. They looked at each other. Can we fix it? Stephen asked. Mason checked the calendar. 5 days until launch. Marketing had already committed to the date. Pre-orders were live, press coverage scheduled. We can fix it, Mason said slowly, but we need to rewrite the request distribution architecture. That's 72 hours of work minimum. We have 5 days. We also have to finalize documentation, train support staff, run final integration tests. Mason pulled up the project timeline. We're cutting it close. Close is better than broken, Scarlett said from the doorway. Mason hadn't heard her enter. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Can you do it without delaying launch? If nothing else breaks. That's not reassuring. It's honest, Scarlett smiled grimly. Then get to work. I'll handle the board if they ask questions. For the next 70 hours, Mason barely left the war room. They rewrote the load balancing system from scratch. Tested it. Found bugs. Fixed them. Tested again. Rachel worked beside him through 2 all-nighters, surviving on coffee and spite. This is insane, she said at 4 a.m. on the 3rd day. We're rebuilding critical infrastructure 3 days before launch. Yep. If this fails, we're done. All of us. Yep. You don't seem worried. Mason looked at the code on his screen, at the elegant solution they'd built to replace the broken one. I spent 7 years worrying, didn't help, so now I just build things and trust they'll work. That's either wisdom or delusion. Probably both. At 6 a.m. on day 4 before launch, they ran the final test. Simulated traffic spike. 10,000 simultaneous requests hitting the system at once. The load balancer distributed them perfectly. Response times stayed stable. 0 crashes. David actually cheered. Stephen started laughing. Rachel just put her head down on her desk. We did it, she said into her arms. We actually did it. Mason felt something release in his chest. Not relief. Something bigger, the weight of 7 years lifting. Yeah, he said quietly. We did. Launch day arrived with gray skies and rain that matched Mason's anxiety. He woke at 5 a.m. to find Lily already awake, sitting at their kitchen table with a card she'd made. For good luck, she said, handing it to him. The card had a drawing of him at a computer with the words, "My daddy is smart," written in crayon. Mason's throat tightened. Thanks, baby. Are you nervous? Terrified. Sophie's mom says your project is going to fail because you don't know what you're doing. Sophie's mom needs a hobby, Lily giggled. That's what Mrs. Chen said too. Mason got dressed in a suit he'd actually bought with his first real paycheck. It fit better than the borrowed one. Made him look like someone who belonged in boardrooms instead of someone pretending. At Apex, the lobby was chaos. Press had gathered for the announcement. Investors mingled with executives. Marketing staff rushed around with tablets and headsets looking like they were coordinating a military operation. Scarlett found Mason in the war room doing final system checks. "Ready?" she asked. "No." "Good. Neither am I." She sat beside him. "You know this is going to work, right?" "I know we did everything possible to make it work. The rest is luck and timing." "I'll take those odds." Scarlett looked at the screens showing Project Helix running smoothly. "A month ago, I thought I'd lose the company. Now we're about to prove everyone wrong. We haven't proved anything yet. We proved Victor was a fraud. We proved you're the real architect. We proved good work still matters." She stood. "The rest is just show business." The launch event started at 10 a.m. Scarlett gave the presentation. She was good at it, confident, polished. She explained what Project Helix could do without drowning people in technical details. Showed demonstrations that looked effortless because Mason and his team had spent 3 weeks making them bulletproof. At 10:47, they went live. Mason watched from backstage with Rachel, David, and Steven. Watched the servers light up as traffic poured in. Watched the load balancer distribute requests exactly as designed. Watched the system handle in 3 minutes what it would have crashed under a month ago. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Enjoy it while it lasts." Victor. Mason deleted it without responding. By noon, Project Helix had processed 100,000 transactions without a single failure. By 2 p.m., tech blogs were calling it revolutionary and the new industry standard. By 4 p.m., the stock had jumped 18%. Morrison found Mason in the war room at 5 p.m. "The board wants to see you," he said. Mason's stomach dropped. "Why?" "Come find out." The boardroom was different from last time. No tension, no hostility, just 12 people who looked like they'd made a lot of money today. "Mr. Carter," Morrison said, and for the first time his voice didn't carry contempt. "The board would like to formally recognize your contributions to Project Helix and to this company." Mason waited for the other shoe to drop. "We're offering you a permanent position as Chief Technology Officer, effective immediately. Full executive compensation package, stock options, the works." Mason blinked. "CTO? The position is vacant. You've proven yourself capable. Unless you'd prefer to remain Chief Architect?" "No, Mason's mind raced. CTO. Victor's old job. The position that had been used to destroy him. "I accept, but I have conditions." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Conditions. Engineering positions are filled based on skill, not credentials or pedigree. We recruit from places competitors ignore. Community colleges, coding boot camps, people who had to take unconventional paths." Mason thought about the night shift, about being invisible. "And we create internships for people working service jobs in this building, janitors, security, food service. If they want to learn engineering, we teach them." The sharp-eyed woman smiled. "Creating your own pipeline. Creating opportunities for people like me, who got buried because they didn't have the right connections." Morrison looked around the table. "Any objections?" No one objected. "Then it's settled. Welcome to the executive team, Mr. Carter." They shook hands. Mason left the boardroom and found Scarlett waiting in the hallway. "CTO," she said. "That's a hell of a promotion from the graveyard shift." "Yeah, it really is. You deserve it." "Maybe. Or maybe I just got lucky you were awake at 2:47 a.m. a month ago." "Luck is what you call it when preparation meets opportunity." Scarlett smiled. "You were prepared. I just gave you the opportunity." "Thank you for that, for all of it. Thank me by building a great team, by making good decisions, by proving that talent matters more than politics." She paused. "And by being the kind of leader you needed 7 years ago." Mason nodded. "I can do that." He went home that night to find Lily and Mrs. Chen watching the news. Project Helix was the lead story on the tech segment. They showed footage of the launch, interviews with analysts calling it groundbreaking, and a 30-second clip of Mason explaining the technology to a reporter. "That's you," Lily shouted. "You're on TV." "Yeah, baby, that's me." "You look fancy. I feel ridiculous." Mrs. Chen snorted. "You look like someone important. Finally." Over the next 3 months, things changed in ways both big and small. Mason moved Lily into a 2-bedroom apartment with windows that faced actual sunlight instead of brick walls. He bought her new shoes, enrolled her in a better school where Sophie's mom couldn't spread poison, started a college fund that had more than $17 in it. The lawsuit from Victor dragged on but lost momentum as evidence piled up. His lawyers tried to settle. Apex's lawyers refused. They wanted a judgment, wanted it on record that Victor Hale had committed fraud. On a Tuesday in November, the judge ruled in Apex's favor. All of Victor's patents invalidated, compensatory damages awarded. Criminal referrals sent to prosecutors for fraud investigation. Mason got the news while interviewing a candidate for his new internship program, a woman in her 40s who worked the night shift in building security and wanted to learn programming. "You have the job," he told her after 30 minutes of conversation. "Start next Monday." "Really?" Her eyes went wide. "Just like that?" "Just like that." "You're smart, you're motivated, you showed up, that's all I need." She left looking dazed and happy. Rachel stuck her head in. "Victor's toast," she said. "Judgment just posted, legal's opening champagne." Mason didn't feel like celebrating, just felt tired. 7 years of fighting compressed into 4 months of chaos. It was over. Victor had lost everything. Mason had won. It should feel better than it did. "You okay?" Rachel asked. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About how winning doesn't erase the 7 years I lost. Doesn't give me back the time with Lily. Doesn't undo the damage." Mason looked at his hands. "Victor destroyed my life. Now I've destroyed his. But that doesn't make me whole." "No," Rachel agreed. "But you built something new. That's better than whole. That's growth." Maybe she was right. Mason was still figuring out what came after winning, how to be the person he'd become instead of the person he'd been. 6 months after launch, Project Helix had 50 million users. A year later, it was the industry standard. Apex stock tripled. The company hired 300 new engineers. Mason personally interviewed every single one. He built the team he had always wanted, people from state schools and community colleges, career changers and late bloomers, a former teacher who'd learned to code at 40, a line cook who'd taught himself Python on YouTube, people who'd been invisible until someone looked close enough to see them. Rachel became his deputy. Together, they created an engineering culture that valued results over pedigree. They killed meetings that wasted time, eliminated approval chains that slowed work, let people solve problems instead of asking permission first. Morrison retired from the board. The sharp-eyed woman replaced him as chair. She and Scarlett ran the company like people who actually cared about building things instead of just extracting value. Victor disappeared from the industry entirely. Last Mason heard, he was working at a consulting firm in another state, using a different name, telling a different story. Mason didn't care, didn't follow his trajectory, just let him go and focused on building instead of destroying. On a Thursday afternoon, 2 years after he'd fixed Project Helix in 40 minutes, Mason stood in the Apex lobby watching the evening cleaning crew arrive for their shift. They pushed carts identical to the one he'd pushed, wore uniforms identical to the one he'd worn, moved through the building like ghosts nobody saw. Lily stood beside him, 8 years old now, taller, confident in ways he'd never been at her age. "Is that what you used to do?" she asked, pointing at a woman emptying trash cans. "Yeah, baby, that was my job." "Why?" "Because it was the only job I could get. Because I'd made mistakes, and people decided I didn't deserve better." "That's dumb." Mason smiled. "Yeah, it was." He walked over to the woman. She looked up, startled that an executive was talking to her. "What's your name?" Mason asked. "Carmen." "You like this job, Carmen?" She looked confused. "It's a job. It pays." "What would you rather be doing?" I don't know. I used to work in accounting before I lost my license. Made some mistakes with a client's books. Now, this is all I can get." Mason pulled out a business card. His card, Chief Technology Officer. "We have a financial systems opening, entry level, requires accounting knowledge. Interested?" Carmen stared at the card like it might bite her. "Is this a joke?" "No. Interview is Monday if you want it. Show up. Tell them I sent you. See what happens." He walked away before she could respond. Lily grabbed his hand. "Why'd you do that?" she asked. Because someone did it for me. Because people deserve second chances. Because invisible people do better work when someone actually sees them. They walked out of the building together, into a city that looked the same as always but felt different. Mason had stopped being invisible, had built something real, had proven that talent mattered and truth eventually won. But the thing he was proudest of wasn't the title or the stock options or the office with his name on the door. It was the 17 people he'd hired from the night shift, the woman from building security who now led a development team, the janitor who'd become a systems analyst, the food service worker who'd built an app used by millions, people who'd been exactly where Mason had been, working invisible jobs, believing they'd lost their chance, surviving instead of living. He'd shown them what Scarlett had shown him, that one opportunity could change everything, that past mistakes didn't define future potential, that the person emptying trash cans might be the person who saves your company if you're brave enough to ask them what they're capable of. Lily looked up at him as they waited for the subway. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you happy now?" Mason thought about it, about the apartment with sunlight, about the job that paid enough, about the daughter who believed her father could do impossible things, about the people he'd helped who were helping others, about the culture he'd built that valued work over politics, about proving that good engineering still mattered in a world that often forgot. "Yeah, baby," he said. "I'm happy now." "Good. Because you smile more. I like when you smile." They took the subway home together. Mason made spaghetti while Lily did homework at a table big enough for both of them. They watched a movie about dinosaurs. She fell asleep on the couch. Mason carried her to her own bedroom in an apartment where she didn't have to share his space, tucked her under covers that weren't worn thin, kissed her forehead, and whispered that he loved her. His phone buzzed. "Scarlett. Board meeting tomorrow. They want to discuss your proposal for the apprenticeship expansion." He texted back, "I'll be ready." Mason stood in his daughter's doorway watching her sleep, thinking about the janitor who'd fixed an impossible problem in 40 minutes, about the CEO who'd taken a chance on a stranger, about the team that had believed in someone nobody else saw, about how sometimes the people nobody notices are the ones who change everything. If you're reading this and you're invisible right now, if you're working a job people look through, if you made mistakes that cost you everything and you're trying to rebuild from nothing, keep going, learn what you can, build what you're able. Be ready when someone finally sees you, because talent doesn't disappear just because people stop looking for it. It waits, it grows, it gets ready, and when the door finally opens, even just a crack, you push through it and prove you deserve to be there all along. Mason Carter did, and so can you. Oh,